Testing, one, two, three, testing. Testing, one, two, three, testing from the witness mic. Testing from a member mic, testing, one, two, three.
Subcommittee on Highways and Transit will come to order. I ask unanimous consent that the chairman be authorized to declare recess at any time during today's hearing without objection, so ordered. I also ask unanimous consent that members not on the subcommittee be permitted to sit with the subcommittee today at this hearing and ask questions without objection, so ordered. As a reminder, if members wish to insert a document into the record, please also email it to documentsti@mail.house.gov. I now recognize myself for the purposes of an opening statement for 5 minutes. Good morning, and thank you to our witnesses for being here for today's hearing. Much of the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee's activities this year have focused on efforts to address the nation's supply chain crisis, and rightly so. The pandemic exposed the fragility of our supply chain. Labor shortages and shutdowns, most notably of cities, factories, and manufacturing hubs in China, as well as demand changes, decimated our logistics system and economy. And the administration has only pushed policies that have led to historic levels of inflation and sky-high gas prices, further exacerbating the supply chain problem and pain in our pocketbooks. As part of our efforts, we have received testimony and considered proposals to strengthen our supply chain, in part by addressing the unprecedented challenges facing our nation's trucking industry and truck drivers. This subcommittee understands that truck drivers are critical to our supply chain and economy as a whole. They provide the necessary connectivity between different modes of transportation, such as ships, trains, and planes. Over 8.7 million commercial motor vehicle drivers operate in the United States, traveling billions of miles each year, serving every community in our country. In fact, more than 70% of our nation's freight tonnage is moved by the trucking industry every year. And more than 80% of our communities get their goods exclusively by truck, despite the fact that we have an estimated shortage of 78,000 truck drivers today. Workforce needs are only expected to continue to be a challenge. It's estimated 1.2 million new drivers will need to be recruited over the next decade to keep pace with growing demand and an aging workforce. Therefore, it's fitting that we're holding this hearing in the middle of National Truck Driver Appreciation Week as we celebrate these valued professionals who work every day to deliver products to every community in the country. During our hearing today, we'll explore the benefits realized from the deployment of automated commercial vehicles, or CMVs. First, autonomous trucks can increase safety on our nation's roadways and save lives. The National Traffic Safety Administration estimates that 42,795 people die in all motor vehicle accidents in 2022. Despite the great progress we've made over the years incorporating safety features in all vehicles and infrastructure, strengthening traffic safety laws, and reinforcing them with public and driver education, improving healthcare outcomes, traffic fatalities have not fallen below 2004's rate of 1.08 per 100 million vehicle miles traveled. The good news is that we know the major source of these crashes. A whopping 94% of serious crashes are due to driver factors such as speeding or driving while fatigued, impaired, or distracted. AV trucks, like AV cars, help us with anticipating road dangers and mitigating or removing human error from the chain of events that lead to a crash, thereby reducing the number of accidents caused by human error. In addition, autonomous trucks can strengthen our supply chain. Arkansas's own Tyson Foods just announced last week that it's partnering with Gatik AI in a multi-year collaboration to deploy refrigerated box trucks in Northwest Arkansas to support fast product movement, ensure supply chain continuity, and guard against continued workforce shortages. AV trucks can increase the efficiency and productivity of logistics and transportation operations and enable route optimization, which in turn would reduce delivery times. They can improve fleet utilization and efficiencies. Productivity and operation saving result in lower fleet rates that would be passed on to consumers and provide solutions to supply chain bottlenecks. Autonomous trucks also can help address environmental concerns and improve air quality. Roadway capacity increases, less congestion, and fewer crashes would result in reduced fuel consumption and lower emissions. In addition, this can improve the quality of life for truck drivers as it makes driving a big rig less stressful, more enjoyable, and safer. The improvement in a driver's quality of life will help attract new employees to join the industry, which is desperately needed. AV deployment will also create new high-paying jobs in the trucking industry. We need to incorporate employee development and training programs to upskill our workforce so that they can take advantage of new jobs that AVs will create. And while I remain confident about the potential for this technology, I'm also confident that if you choose to become a truck driver today, you will have the ability to retire as a truck driver. While there are many autonomous trucks operating with safety drivers on the road today in certain parts of the country, there is still a long way to go before we reach full commercial deployment. There are also some issues that need to be considered as this expensive technology is safely integrated into existing fleets. For example, we need to discuss if any rules and regulations at the federal level need to change to reflect that a driver may not always be in the cab how trucks can continue to be safely inspected. While many have called for a federal regulatory framework, such a framework would not be only overly prescriptive, but instead create guardrails for the industry to grow with safety at the forefront. We must avoid stifling innovation as the technology develops, and striking this balance is vital for America to continue its global competitive edge in this industry. Make no mistake, the Chinese Communist Party, the biggest geopolitical threat our country faces, is moving aggressively into this space. The CCP will scheme to use the power of their state-owned enterprises to undercut American businesses and manipulate the market. I look forward to hearing from today's panel of stakeholders who offer a unique perspective on the benefits of autonomous trucks and how AV truck technology is developed, brought to market, and safely incorporated into existing transportation companies and networks. I now yield back and recognize Ranking Member Norton for 5 minutes for an opening statement.
I want to thank Subcommittee Chair Rick Crawford for holding this hearing on autonomous vehicles. Today, I am interested in discussing the effects of autonomous vehicles on roadway safety and the commercial driving workforce. This committee has a responsibility to ensure that autonomous vehicles are deployed, the highest possible safety standards are met, and that Americans have access to high-quality family wage transportation jobs. Automated vehicles, including commercial trucks and transit buses, are already on the road in many jurisdictions across the country and have the potential for transforming our transportation system. We must thoughtfully address the emerging opportunities and risks. Nationwide, we are experiencing a startling rise in roadway fatalities. Autonomous vehicles have the potential to save lives by reducing traffic crashes caused by human behavior. But that potential is not a guarantee. Potential safety benefits must be carefully weighed against risks, especially when public roads are being used as testing grounds for new technologies. The bottom line cannot be saving money. It must be saving lives. To that end, Congress and the Department of Transportation must ensure that autonomous vehicle deployments are only permitted in a manner that prioritizes the safety of the traveling public, including vulnerable road users like pedestrians and cyclists. Autonomous vehicles must also be integrated into our transportation system in a way that respects America's commercial driving workforce. Autonomous vehicles could significantly improve working conditions for commercial drivers and increase on-the-job safety. But eliminating the need for a human driver could also result in widespread job displacement if the needs of workers are not prioritized at the outset. Commercial truck driving is a proven career path that offers a wage that can support a family. These jobs do not require a college degree. They are an opportunity for people to achieve high earnings without going into debt. Comprehensive regulations and oversight of autonomous vehicle deployment will be required to create and preserve high-quality, family-wage jobs and good working conditions for Americans whose livelihoods depend on driving. Thank you to each of our witnesses for being here today and offering your unique insights. I look forward to the discussion.
Thank the Ranking Member. Now recognize the Ranking Member of the full committee for any comments he would like to make.
Thank you, Chair, and the Ranking Member as well for holding this hearing. It's an opportunity today for members to learn about the state of the automated commercial motor vehicle industry, what's happening now, what we might see in the future, and how these technological changes will impact public safety, jobs, and the movement of goods. The Transportation Infrastructure Committee regularly discusses the impacts of automation across many modes and in different contexts. Autonomous commercial vehicles, or AVs, however, are in a league of their own in terms of potential impact. Consideration of policies surrounding this technology deserves a high degree of scrutiny for several reasons. The size and reach of this industry. Trucks move over 70% of the nation's freight by weight, and there are 13.8 million large trucks registered in the U.S. The size of the workforce. In 2022, the industry employed 3.5 million truck drivers. The interface with travelers and communities. Every mile and every hour of a truck's operation is on shared public roads used by families, including highways, rural roads, and neighborhood streets, and the safety realities of the industry. Every year, currently, over 5,000 people are killed in crashes involving large trucks on our roads. So let's start with safety. In 2021, 5,788 people were killed in crashes involving large trucks. Non-drivers are particularly vulnerable in roadway crashes. Pedestrian fatalities have reached a 41-year high, and bicyclist fatalities have reached a 46-year high. So I look forward to hearing from our witnesses today about the safety implications of AVs. While these vehicles hold the promise of reducing driver errors like distraction or driving under the influence, they also raise different and new safety questions. How will AVs make split decisions on the roadway? Will they be able to recognize and avoid vulnerable road users? I should say, will the people who program and develop AVs be able to program and develop them to ensure that the trucks recognize and avoid vulnerable road users? Can they interact safely with emergency vehicles like police cruisers or fire trucks? These outcomes will have life and death implications. So while the status quo on highway fatalities is unacceptable, AVs and the people who deploy and design them must be held to the highest standards as they are developed and deployed. We can't substitute one inadequate system for another. Let's take a look at jobs. We talk about transportation, or I talk about transportation as a job creator, including how the bipartisan infrastructure law is projected to create over 700,000 jobs per year. So while autonomous trucks may create new or different jobs with human drivers overseeing or dispatching AVs, their mass deployment stands to eliminate jobs or degrade wages for the existing truck drivers. Commercial AVs, as well, are not limited to trucks. Transit bus operators also face job losses or changes if a human driver becomes unnecessary. AV technology has the potential to make truck driving a better job by helping shift more work to safer, more predictable work in short-haul routes or dispatching. But AVs can also threaten career choices that has long been a path to the middle class and a good paycheck. So I encourage our industry witnesses today to work closely with the drivers, including labor and independent owner-operators, to hear their concerns and harness their real-world experience to make sure the power of this technology builds a safer and cleaner motor carrier industry with better jobs for the women and men who move goods. Now let's take a look at the practical impacts. AVs have the potential to improve mobility and accessibility, but also to worsen congestion and carbon pollution. In a world in which cars and trucks could operate without drivers, it's not hard to imagine that gridlock and pollution could come alongside a nascent technology. Unlike a smartphone, this isn't a case where we can put our technology out there and work out the kinks as we go along. There are implications for our infrastructure. Roadway conditions vary road by road, state by state, and day by day with changing weather. The technology and those people who develop it need to ensure consistency and uniformity to perform as expected, regardless of everyday conditions. As AVs deploy, we may learn quickly the required changes to signage, lane striping, or even roadway design that are needed for them to perform optimally, all requiring infrastructure improvements. So this is an issue of particular importance to this committee and a key question that will need answers as we look to the next round in the future of investment in the revitalization of our roads, bridges, and highways. So there's a lot of questions. Some of them are probably perfectly easily answerable, some probably not. And so I look forward to hearing about the state of the industry today and learning more from our witnesses about how to best approach these opportunities and, importantly for this committee, these challenges. With that, I yield back.
Thank the ranking member. Now I'd like to welcome our witnesses and thank you for being here today. Chris Urmson is the co-founder and chief executive officer of Aurora, a company founded in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania that is working to commercialize autonomous trucks. Jeff Farah is the first executive director of the Autonomous Vehicle Industry Association, which represents both automotive and trucking industry interests. And we have two witnesses who can speak to how this technology will be safely integrated into our transportation network. Chris Spear is the president and CEO of the American Trucking Associations, along with Kathy Chase, who's the president of Advocates for Auto and Highway Safety. Thank you all for being here. Briefly, let me take a minute to explain how our lighting system works for our witnesses. There are 3 lights in front of you. Green means go, but unlike a stoplight, yellow does not necessarily mean proceed with caution, as you might expect. In fact, it means go like heck because it's fixing to turn red. And that means it's time to conclude your remarks. If you don't conclude your remarks at that time, you may hear a little something like this, just as a reminder that the light has in fact turned red. I ask unanimous consent that the witness's full statements be included in the record without objection. So ordered. As your written testimony has been made part of the record, the subcommittee asks that you limit your oral remarks to 5 minutes. With that, Mr. Urmson, you are recognized for 5 minutes for your testimony.
Chairman Graves, Ranking Member Larson, Chairman Crawford, Ranking Member Holmes Norton, and members of the subcommittee, thank you for the opportunity to testify. I'd also like to take this opportunity to thank the men and women who keep our economy moving by driving trucks today, and in particular the Aurora Vehicle Operations Team during National Truck Driver Appreciation Week. My name is Chris Urmson, and I'm the CEO and co-founder of Aurora, an American autonomous vehicle technology company headquartered in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Thank you for the opportunity to testify this morning and for the subcommittee's interest in learning about and collaborating on this important topic. Today, I'd like to tell you about how safety guides everything we do at Aurora, the jobs we support, and what the future of autonomous trucking looks like from my perspective. Over my 20-year career, I've worked on solving one of the toughest engineering challenges of our time, enabling vehicles to drive themselves safely. From my time with Carnegie Mellon, then Google's self-driving car project, and now at Aurora, my passion for improving safety on our roadways has driven my career. Aurora's mission is to deliver the benefits of self-driving technology safely, quickly, and broadly. We're building the Aurora Driver, which will safely move goods and people through the world. The Aurora Driver is made up of the hardware, the software, and the data services needed to drive vehicles safely. Since founding Aurora in 2017, I'm very proud that we've grown from just our 3 co-founders, Sterling Anderson, Drew Bagnell, and me, into a publicly traded company that employs 1,800 people in 8 cities across 7 states. Together, Aurora's team is an incredible compilation of talent, experience, and expertise. In addition to investing in the people who work at Aurora with me today, we're trying to do our part in developing the future workforce for the jobs of tomorrow. For example, Aurora worked with the Pittsburgh Technical College to design an associate degree program that trains and accredits fleet support technicians, giving them the tools they need to maintain autonomous vehicles and support automated vehicle operations. This complements the work we do with Galton College in Bozeman, Montana, where Aurora is investing in new educational programs to train sensor technicians. As the needs for these jobs grows, academic degrees, technical training programs, and apprenticeships will be essential in building the workforce of the future. Autonomous vehicle technology is not science fiction. It's not hypothetical. In fact, it's already here. Between Dallas and Houston and Fort Worth and El Paso, we're hauling over 50 loads per week for our commercial partners like FedEx, Werner, Hirschbeck, Schneider, and Uber Freight. Today, we have a trained operator with a commercial driver's license behind the wheel and a right seat operator next to them monitoring the autonomous system as we complete our validation work and safety case. Hauling customer loads help us build our technology and support services to seamlessly integrate into our partners' operations. It's unacceptable that we lose 42,000 Americans on our roads every year. A culture focused on safety is paramount for the success of Aurora and addressing this ongoing tragedy. In my written testimony, I've included details about Aurora's safety work, from our first-of-its-kind safety management system, our safety case framework, and our engagement developing best practices and safety standards that will guide the AV industry. We're working hard to ensure that autonomous vehicles can operate safely. We're also building a culture and organizational safety program knowing that we have to build trust. First and foremost, with all stakeholders, from legislators and regulators at all levels of government, to our customers and the communities where we operate. Aurora's Chief Safety Officer, Nat Buse, testified at the autonomous vehicle hearing last February, and I look forward to answering questions about the progress we've made since then toward completing our safety case. I hope our commitment to transparency and safety is clear as we continue to engage with all of you on these important issues. You may be wondering what the government can do to support American automated vehicle technology. I'm looking forward to answering your questions you may have about our cab-mounted warning beacon exemption application pending before FMCSA. Granting the application would be a clear way for the federal government to support the safe deployment of all AVs and demonstrate to the world how important improving roadway safety is to the United States. The basic principles of American innovation and the free flow of capital are why we could build a company with a mission and business model that will benefit America. America must maintain this competitive advantage and continue to invest in automated vehicle technology. After 2 decades in the autonomous vehicle industry, I'm incredibly excited and motivated by the future in front of us as a country. I look forward to answering your questions. Thank you.
Well done, and time to spare. Appreciate that. Before I recognize Mr. Farrer, I'm going to ask if you would to pull that microphone just a little bit closer to you so we can hear you just a little bit better, because we were having a little bit difficulty with the system. So with that, Mr. Farrer, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Chairman Crawford, Ranking Member Holmes Norton, Ranking Member Larson, members of the committee. It is a privilege to appear before you today and to lead the Autonomous Vehicle Industry Association. For decades, autonomous vehicles were a technological aspiration of our country's most brilliant innovators. As we sit here today, autonomous vehicles are a reality and are increasingly being deployed on America's roads and highways using advanced technology to perform all aspects of the driving task. One of the most promising applications is in autonomous trucking, which will deliver safer roads as well as supply chain and global competitiveness benefits. Since this subcommittee last examined autonomous trucks in February 2022, autonomous trucks have moved forward, bringing us closer to safer roads and more resilient supply chains. Important and well-established companies are moving freight autonomously, including Walmart, FedEx, Kroger, Tyson Foods. We are at an exciting moment where Americans will begin to benefit from years of investment and technological advancement. I want to make 3 important points. First, safety drives everything we do in the autonomous vehicle industry. This starts from why people gravitate towards the industry and extends to how the technology is developed, tested, and deployed. As you know, the safety status quo is unacceptable, and autonomous trucks will make us all safer. Sadly, nearly 43,000 people died on America's roads last year, and more than 5,800 of these were in truck crashes. The overwhelming cause of crashes is human error, and autonomous trucks are designed to remove that error from the equation and are programmed to serve as model drivers. There has never been a fatality involving an autonomous truck. Federal government data demonstrates the remarkable safety record of AV trucks. For more than 2 years, the Department of Transportation has required AV companies to report any incident, even the most minor, when the technology is engaged. This is an incredible level of transparency. The time period covered by the DOT data has been a period of significant growth for our industry. It is important to keep in mind that this is not an industry that is just getting off the ground. Autonomous vehicles have been safely testing and deploying for more than a dozen years and have driven more than 45 million autonomous miles on U.S. public roads. The more these vehicles drive, the safer they get, resulting in more American lives saved. Second, autonomous trucking is a true win-win situation for America's workers and the economy as a whole. This is National Truck Driver Appreciation Week, and I want to be clear. The autonomous trucking industry needs truck drivers who are vital to our nation's supply chain. Autonomous trucking will coexist with America's truck drivers as it rolls out deliberately over a number of years. This is why a U.S. Department of Transportation-sponsored study found that autonomous trucking will increase U.S. employment up to 35,000 jobs per year on average in the next 30 years. Freight volume will continue to increase in the United States, with DOT estimating freight activity to grow 50% by 2050. Yet our country is struggling to keep up with the supply chain challenges of today's volume. The problem will only get worse in the future, since our current truck driver shortage of 78,000 is set to double by 2031. If we fail as a country to meet this demand, we are holding back our farmers, ranchers, and manufacturers who must move their goods. We believe autonomous trucking is one of the solutions to this problem and can help alleviate the driver shortage. By helping to move more freight, we can create more opportunities for all, especially jobs for truck drivers in their communities. In addition to new economic opportunities, this will lead to a better quality of life for our nation's truck drivers. Third and finally, it is critical that policymakers embrace autonomous trucks to ensure U.S. global leadership and national security. We have been pleased to see the Department of Defense embrace autonomous trucks to execute its mission. The United States is currently leading the way on autonomous trucks, but other countries, including China, are determined to realize the benefits of this technology. AV trucks will be a part of the future of transportation. The only question is which country will lead the way and reap the rewards. We must collectively make sure this country is the United States of America. Thank you again for the opportunity to testify. I look forward to any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Farrow. Mr. Spear, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman Crawford, Ranking Member Holmes Norton, full committee Ranking Member Larson, and members of the subcommittee. I appreciate the opportunity to testify this morning on behalf of the American Trucking Associations. This hearing coincides with National Truck Driver Appreciation Week, as you've already heard. It's an annual celebration honoring all 3.5 million professional truck drivers for their service to our nation's economy. Each year, these heroes drive over 320 billion miles. That's equal to 13 million trips around the globe, delivering 12 billion tons of freight, now 72.5% of our goods. We celebrate these achievements this week as an important reminder of the critical role they play the other 51 weeks of the year. Today's hearing examines the impact automated commercial vehicles will have on consumers, our supply chain, and the United States' ability to remain a global innovator. What's key to each is our industry's ability to safely and responsibly meet economic demand. We believe AVs are a critical piece to that equation, including their potential to assist drivers further improving their awareness and responsiveness. You're all aware there is now a shortage of talent in most sectors of employment. Our industry is no exception. In fact, trucking has long battled a shortage of drivers and technicians, largely due to 4 decades of unchanged federal weight and length requirements and surging consumption, an aging workforce, barriers to entry for younger workers, an underrepresentation of women, and lifestyle preferences precluding many job seekers from considering long-haul trucking. In 2022, the shortage of qualified drivers was at a near-record level of 78,000. Projections show that our industry will need to hire 1.2 million more drivers over the next decade just to keep pace with economic demand and replenish an aging workforce. In short, we need more drivers, and we needed them yesterday. I stress this data as it underscores the challenges our industry faces to meet the needs of society, to avoid lags in the supply chain, and maintain the nation's position as a world leader. In short, there's plenty of room for innovation to help fill this gap without displacing drivers. To the contrary, we see this technology as improving the essential job of truck driving by making it safer, more productive, and less stressful. We believe it is vital to attracting the next generation of talent into this profession. What's needed first is a national framework that encourages development, testing, and deployment of technology in direct support of interstate commerce. Federal guidance should treat commercial and passenger vehicles equally and require automated vehicles to achieve an acceptable level of safety and performance rather than requiring the use of specific technologies. The ATA and its members commit to working with the subcommittee to help shape this framework, blending technological value with operational realities that reduce highway injuries and fatalities. Levels 2 through 4 driver assist technologies are already producing safer operations of commercial and passenger vehicles, protecting truck drivers and the motoring public through preventive means. Our written testimony also underscores the importance of cybersecurity, where ATA is working with federal agencies and the law enforcement community to standardize protocols that safeguard the movement of freight. Conversely, securing cargo and ensuring that movement of hazardous materials, livestock, and produce, particularly in extreme weather conditions, are all factors that will undoubtedly require a driver, superseding the values of automation. Lastly, our nation must continue to lead the world in innovation, not concede vital ground to competitors or foes who are actively developing and deploying integrated systems with domestically sourced chips and software. A federal performance-based framework will ensure that the United States is not relegated to the position of bench warmer. ATA starts with yes. We come here to this hearing with data, facts, and real-world experiences that help generate outcomes. Understanding and solving this issue won't happen if decisions rely on baseless rhetoric and emotion. To that end, Mr. Chairman, I look forward to answering your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ms. Chase, you're recognized for 5 minutes. Can you hit your microphone, please?
Sorry about that. Good morning, Chair Crawford, Ranking Member Norton, Ranking Member Larson, and subcommittee members. I'm Kathy Chase, President of Advocates for Highway and Auto Safety. Advocates is a national coalition of leading property casualty insurance companies and agents and public health, consumer, law enforcement, and safety groups working together since 1989 to prevent crashes, save lives, and reduce economic costs. Thank you for holding today's hearing at a critical time when motor vehicle crash fatalities are at historic highs. Nearly 43,000 people were killed and 2.5 million more were injured in 2021. Fatal truck crashes have also been on the rise, increasing by 71% since 2009. These are not just statistics. They are family members and friends who have needlessly died or been seriously injured in a preventable truck crash. Many are joining us today in person or virtually. I want to thank them for their strength and determination to advance common sense and cost-effective solutions to prevent truck crashes. Also, I want to acknowledge National Truck Driver Appreciation Week and convey my gratitude for their essential contributions to our everyday lives. Truck driving is one of the most dangerous jobs in our country, and drivers are at risk every time they get behind the wheel. Automated or driverless technology, including cars, trucks, and buses, is being offered as a solution to reduce our nation's mounting death and injury toll. However, this remedy cannot be realized without rigorous testing, effective regulation setting minimum performance standards, comprehensive data collection, full transparency to inform regulators and the public, diligent government oversight, and AV industry accountability to immediately identify problems and take corrective actions. In other words, we need to know what's happening on our roads and we need to make them safe. AV safety performance and reliability are largely unknown, unresolved, and frequently unpredictable. What we do know is that AV operations in San Francisco have caused numerous dangerous situations. City officials, emergency responders, and local transportation leaders have raised serious safety concerns and strongly opposed the recent program expansion. The safety mishaps are substantial and the consequences are alarming. A recent crash involving an AV and a fire truck and other incidents resulted in the state's regulatory agency cutting certain AV operations by 50%. While AVs for passengers and AV trucks are not the same, there are similarities and lessons to be learned from the ongoing San Francisco program. The serious problems must not be replicated or magnified with trucks or transit vehicles, which are significantly larger and heavier, more complex to operate, and can have devastating outcomes in crashes. It's really no surprise that the public has serious concerns about AVs. Advocates commissioned a national public opinion poll earlier this year. It revealed that nearly 9 in 10 people are concerned about sharing the roads with driverless trucks. When asked if their concerns about driverless vehicles would be addressed if required to meet minimum government standards, 64% responded yes. In 2020, advocates, together with key stakeholders, developed the AV tenets to guide the development and policies concerning the introduction and operation of AVs. More than 65 groups representing truck drivers, unions, disability rights, emergency responders, law enforcement, bicyclists, pedestrians, smart growth, and others support the tenets. They offer a blueprint to achieve essential goals. 1, to prioritize the safety of all road users. 2, to guarantee accessibility and equity for all individuals, including those with disabilities. 3, to preserve consumer and worker rights. And 4, to ensure local control and sustainable transportation. Furthermore, the safe development and deployment of driverless trucks requires issuing federal performance standards and other necessary regulations, reporting crashes involving fatalities, injuries, and property damage, rejecting mass exemptions from federal safety standards, collecting data and making it publicly available, requiring driverless trucks to always have an operator with a valid CD in the vehicle for the foreseeable future, and requiring other necessary endorsements, and attaining additional operating authority for motor carriers with driverless trucks. As AV trucks progress, many proven safety solutions that can dramatically reduce truck crash and injuries now are currently available and need to be implemented. For example, the bipartisan infrastructure law included a mandate for automatic emergency trucks within 2 years. Moreover, these are the building blocks for the possibility of future AV cars and trucks. In closing, advancing safety, achieving technological innovation, and attaining economic leadership can and must be compatible goals and not trade-offs. Thank you.
Thank you, and let the record reflect that each of our 4 witnesses came in under their allotted time, which rarely happens. Appreciate that. Now recognize members for testimony, starting with myself. Mr. Spear, I appreciate everything ATA and its members do to improve safety and the quality of life for nation's truck drivers, particularly during this week as we honor our truck drivers and National Truck Drivers Appreciation Week. This committee believes in the value of American truckers, as do you. I know that's the case. We're exploring new technologies, and that's not to try and displace truckers. It's actually to assist truckers, and I want to know if you agree with that statement, and if so, can you expand on it a little bit?
I do. I really draw attention as we were talking through our opening statements about the shortage of talent. And we see it across every segment of employment, but specific to truck drivers. We're short right now 78,000 drivers. We're going to have to bring in 1.2 million more over the next decade just to meet economic demand and deal with an aging, retiring workforce. So there's a massive gap here to fill. Innovation can play a role, Mr. Chairman. It has the ability to not only enable our existing driver force to be more aware and responsive and have more command and control when they're driving, which is good for the motoring public. That breeds safety. But it also has the development of autonomous vehicles in years to come where we can fill that gap. If we're not going to add workforce to fill that 78,000, we're going to need technology. We're going to need innovation to play that role. So we believe that there is a place for both to cohabitate, and displacement is a myth. Now, if we didn't have a shortage, we'd be having a candid discussion about people losing their jobs. That is not the case here. There's no data to support that. I've read all the letters and everything that's been submitted to you. I can assure you, displacement is a myth. So there's plenty of room for innovation to play a role. We need to embrace it, and it has serious, measurable benefits to safety.
Thank you. I want to turn to Mr. Urmson, if I could. We're living in a world now where we face a lot of cyber threats. And so I want to give you an opportunity to kind of explain how you're addressing, how your technology addresses that evolving threat, because what's happening today doesn't look like what will happen tomorrow and the next day with regard to cyber threats.
Thank you for the question. Obviously, cybersecurity is a much broader topic than automated vehicles. We have this challenge, whether it's with our industrial infrastructure or with vehicles that are on the road today. At Aurora, we take this very seriously. Our whole business is our intellectual property and the systems we're developing, and so we've invested heavily in a cybersecurity team. I think we have around 50 people that are dedicated to improving the cybersecurity, both of our corporate infrastructure, but importantly, the product infrastructure. They look at best practices, various standards that are promulgated, even those, of course, from NIST, and we integrate that into the way we develop our systems. So, as you know, we have to continue to innovate in this space. It's kind of a running battle, but we feel well equipped to fight that battle.
Thank you. Mr. Farrow, real quick, Monday, the California Senate passed a bill requiring a driver in any autonomous vehicle over 10,000 pounds. What's the impact of this legislation on our nation's supply chain?
Mr. Chairman, thank you very much for the question. The bill I believe you're referring to is AB 316, and interestingly enough, Governor Newsom's agencies at a state level, including the Department of Motor Vehicle, the Governor's Office of Business Development, other agencies have vociferously opposed this bill. They have noted that it would be detrimental from a safety and supply chain perspective to California. I think that it really goes back to what I said during the opening statement, which is that we need to move more freight in this country. Otherwise, we are letting down the people that depend upon the supply chain. That is acutely the case in California. You've seen a lot of strains that have happened on the ports of Long Beach and in Los Angeles. This is something where a lot of the prominence of those ports has shifted east, and that's certainly benefited other states. And California is very vital to our supply chain. And so if they ultimately reject this this technology, this is something where it not only locks in the safety status quo, which is unacceptable on California's roads, it also continues to put California behind the 8 ball. And so we're hopeful that Governor Newsom's agencies are able to ultimately make this point very, very loud and clear, and we're hopeful that the governor will veto that bill.
Thank you. Again, thank the witnesses. I yield the balance of my time to recognize Ranking Member Norton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Chase, your testimony was a little scary. You held up a picture that I took note of. And you note that there are currently no standards to ensure that driver assistance technologies protect those outside of the vehicle, including pedestrians and cyclists. As we see the advancement from driver assistance technology to fully self-driving vehicles, we need to protect these vulnerable road users even more. What should Congress and the Department of Transportation be doing to ensure that partially and fully automated vehicles will prioritize the safety of those walking and bicycling on our roads?
Thank you for the question, Ranking Member Norton. I want to first clarify, my staff informed me that I misspoke, and I said automated emergency trucking instead of automated emergency braking. And that brings me to answer your question, actually. On the road to protect vulnerable road users, we should be advancing proven technologies that we know work now. For example, the Insurance Institute for Highway Safety, which is well known for its crash testing down in Ruckersville, Virginia, is a very prominent and respected organization. And they have demonstrated that automatic emergency braking can reduce front to rear large truck crashes by 41%. That's pretty tremendous if you think about it. So on the path to autonomous vehicles, as we think about protecting all road users, including vulnerable road users, we really need to make sure that technologies like automatic emergency braking and other advanced driver assistance systems get into all trucks now. We know how to save lives. We just need Congress and the U.S. Department of Transportation, as you suggested, make it happen. There are also other technologies like underride protections, speed limiters, and electronic logging devices, which are required in cars now, but there are currently special interests who request exemptions. We need to protect ELDs because they do make sure that truck drivers are following the hours of service requirements. So in sum, there are steps that can be taken on the path to automated trucks that could be saving lives now.
Thank you. Mr. Farrar, now I think, if I recall correctly, that you said displacement would not occur, that the autonomous vehicle companies indeed frequently claim that job losses in the long-haul trucking will be replaced by more jobs in short-haul routes. But a recent study by the University of Michigan and Carnegie Mellon University found that the loss of long-haul jobs will not be made up for either in quantity or in quality by short-haul jobs. The study notes that short-haul jobs typically pay less and that many truck drivers will have to relocate to find those jobs. These factors could weaken a job option that has long served as a path to the middle class. Can you respond to the study's findings about losses in long-haul trucking sector?
Thank you very much for the question. I appreciate it. I'd be happy to take a look at the study and take a look at those specifics and engage with you and your staff. What I will say as a general matter is that the reality is that we are not moving as much freight in this country as we need to today. We are certainly not going to be able to move as much freight as we need to tomorrow and in many years from now. And so we as a country need to figure out a way to do this given the shortages that are happening. Autonomous trucking is one of the solutions that is part of a suite of solutions that we can all work together on to ultimately ease a lot of these supply chain challenges. And so we are trying to be a part of the overall composition of that. We think this is something where there is plenty of work to go around, both for truck drivers, for autonomous trucking companies. This will ultimately allow alleviation of a lot of the supply chain burden. And so that is the aim of our industry and certainly the way we see things playing out over a very long period of time.
Mr. Urmson, you testified that Aurora is hoping to launch fully self-driving trucks without a safety driver in the cab by the end of next year. Even if your technology works perfectly, it will essentially need to make life and death decisions when unexpected conditions arise. Is Aurora able to guarantee that its technology will prioritize the safety of people, not property, not infrastructure, but people, when making split-second decisions on the highway?
Thank you for the question. And safety is paramount to how we approach developing technology at Aurora. Today, we implement what we call a safety case, which is a framework that explains how and why we come to the conclusion that the vehicle is safe to operate, and we've shared that transparently and publicly. We do a lot of development in simulation, where we test challenging scenarios, including ones that you talk about. Just as a concrete example, we looked at fatal accidents that involve trucks on I-45, where our trucks are operating today, between the years 2018 and 2022. Across those, there's about 29 of those events where the Aurora driver could have actually been operating the vehicle. And had the Aurora driver been operating, none of those events would have happened, which translates to no fatalities in those situations. To give you an idea of this type of situations that come up, there was one event that we looked at where 2 passenger vehicles had a minor fender bender. The people had got out of the vehicle, were assessing it. A heavy truck came down the road behind them for whatever reason, noticed the event late, and then swerved on the shoulder to avoid the vehicles, and ultimately killed some people. In our simulations, what happens is exactly what you would hope would happen. The truck sees them at range, reacts, decelerates, and then lane changes to the left to avoid the scene, and everybody would have gone home safely. So we take that objective very seriously.
Gentleman's time's expired. Mr. Boss, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I'm going to say more of a statement. I'm not even going to ask questions. Many of you know that I grew up in a trucking company. I drove trucks. I lived it. We started a business I didn't start a business in 1933. I'm not that old, but my grandfather did. But, I have some serious concerns as far as AV trucking. And I want to be real clear that I'm not opposed to it. At the same time, I want to make sure that certain important roles of human drivers is not lost because of that innovation. I've sat in a seat, like I've told you. I've ran the company. It's a small company. My big concern is the only ones that will have access are the mega trucking companies and are those that can make the major investments, and that it will strangle the small trucking companies out of business. I have concerns about that. I also have concerns about how much safety it is that we can actually put in autonomous trucks. I know that the technology is there. I also know that we have enemies around this world that knows how to tap into technology and can cause major concern if we have a lot of them running up and down our roads and would possibly do some kind of technology that would cause a loss or a breakdown when we become dependent on too many of the autonomous trucks. I know the concerns that we have. And we put ourselves into a lot of this situation in this United States. One, I think, when the fact is that that we have made it so difficult for drivers quite often to get their license. You know, in my company, we never let anybody who was unsafe drive. We checked them out. But now we've put rules in place that says, no, now you're going to pay a lot of money to send them to a truck driving school. And then a bigger company can take them away, and you've spent all the money on educating and making sure you have a safe driver. Not only that, we have states throughout this nation that keep legalizing marijuana, and we can't get drivers to pass a simple drug test because once you smoke one joint, that shows up in your bloodstream for 30 days. It's not like having a beer on Sunday and driving on Monday. So we've put ourselves in a lot of bad situations by existing laws. I think we still have a problem, as far as I'm concerned, of hours of service and with the electronic logbooks, because it doesn't allow for drivers to use the common sense and common safety that would encourage them to stay in the trucking business, because if all of a sudden they're an hour from home, but they're plenty rested, they can't go ahead and get back home. Instead, they have to find a place to pull over, and many of you know that I'm also carrying the language that for the truck parking, because if you see all the problems we have out there right now, and I appreciate your support on doing that. But my statement is just this. I know everybody wants to be safe, but I think there's certain safety mechanisms that we can't guarantee. We can't guarantee what hackers might be able to get into and put autonomous trucks at risk to our people. We don't, I think we can put a lot of safety in there, but we've got to be very, very, very careful. And I would hate to see a truck driving industry, I know we need drivers now, but I would hate to see this grow so much that we are no longer dependent on our truck drivers. They do a good job. I'm always bothered by the fact whenever I'm driving down the road with some friends, and you've all done it, or you've all seen it happen, and you're following behind, and one truck's trying to pass another truck, and you're in a hurry, and by golly, you're griping at the truck driver. You should never badmouth the truck driver or the farmer when your mouth is full. Just isn't wise. And let me say that we've got to make sure that the drivers that are making sure the shelves are full have the opportunity to continue to get good paying jobs doing the work that many of them love. And I just don't want to see us head down a path where we would destroy that. We are, and I'm sure this technology is going to move forward. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. But I am concerned about those issues. I know that each one of you bringing them up, and I know you're watching them very closely. But on this week and month where we are thanking our truck drivers, we want to make sure that we're truly thanking them, not putting them out. So thank you.
Gentleman yields. Ranking Member Larson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First question's for Ms. Chase. And hearing quite a bit about safety, but much of this potential seems to be years away. And in your testimony, you talked through steps that can be taken today. What would be the top 3 steps we can take today to improve truck safety and save lives that we're not doing?
Thank you for the question, Ranking Member Larson. As I briefly touched upon with the previous question, I think that automatic emergency braking, getting that into trucks today, would be a significant improvement to reducing truck crashes and also car crashes. Additionally, if we get underride protections on both the rear and the side, and for those of you unfamiliar, who may be unfamiliar with what an underride crash is, it's when the trailer of a truck, which is about at the neck height of a car passenger, goes underneath the truck. And these are particularly gruesome crashes, and if someone survives, they most likely suffer significant brain injury or have had to undergo many surgeries. We've worked with crash victims who have survived, and it's a very difficult life to go through. So those are the top 2. And then the third one, as I mentioned, are speed limiters. We know that about 1,000 people are being killed every year in crashes involving speeding trucks. So if we get the trucks to slow down, and many trucks already have speed limiters, so this is nothing new. We need to just make sure that they're in all trucks to slow the trucks down and make the road safer. And thank you again for the question.
Yeah, thanks. Mr. Farah, you mentioned the 45 million miles on public roadways that autonomous trucks have traveled. The fatality rate is 1.24 deaths per 100 million miles, so you're not even halfway through the standard of the number of miles that we use for rates on deaths, on highway fatality rates. So it's quite some time to go, and I'm not as enthusiastic about the safety record because I don't think there's been enough work yet to be enthusiastic about the safety record, is my point. But I was curious about what, absent more real-world data, has your organization looked at any other proactive safety standards to help prove out AV technology in terms of safer roadways?
Congressman, thank you very much for the question. I should begin by saying I think that your district in particular stands to benefit quite significantly from autonomous trucking, giving proximity to ports and I-5 and other economic activity. In terms of data that is out there, the most important thing that I would point out is that, as you are probably aware, for more than 2 years through NHTSA, the Department of Transportation has required any autonomous vehicle company to report any incident, no matter how minor, when the technology is engaged. And so specific to autonomous trucking, this is really a very remarkable safety record that we now have data on. What we know is that there has only been 14 incidents during that 2-year time period related to autonomous
you testified that. So absent more real-world data, do you support any proactive safety standards to help better prove out AV technology in terms of safer roadways?
Congressman, I think that we are seeing that real-world data, both through the SGO, also in terms of our members as they are passing through different interviews, 1 million, 2 million, 5 million miles driven. They are producing a lot of that is being shared in a very transparent way. And so there is not a shortage of information out there about the safety record of autonomous vehicle companies, and it's something that we're quite proud of.
You'd use the term model driver, and so I just want to tee up Mr. Urmson on this one a little bit. Because you're on I-45, that might actually be a model roadway for you. You're not going to get model roadways in the Pacific Northwest or along the northern tier of the country to test or to fully test out the safety record. So what are you all doing other than thinking about your simulations? What are you all doing to better prove out in non-model conditions the operations of AV technology on trucks?
No, thank you for the question. And I think this is an important concept to understand around automated vehicles.
Can you speak up and just
I
yell in the
apologize.
microphone? Yeah.
I will try to, is that any better, sir?
Yeah, that is.
Okay, sorry about that. Sounded loud here. So as we think about developing the technology, there's actually constraints we can put on it where it will operate. And so as we initially deploy the technology, the Aurora Driver will be constrained to operate initially on the route between Dallas and Houston, and then we expect from there to go between Fort Worth and El Paso. And for each place where we expand out to, we're going to go through a thorough process that fits into that safety case concept that I mentioned earlier, where we evaluate what's different between this new place to drive and the last place, incorporate that understanding, and broaden the test suite that we expose the driver to. So before we ever operate in the Pacific Northwest, where there's rain and sleet and all of that, we'll make sure that we've actually done the development and validation work that's necessary for there. And there's a real reason why a lot of the freight moves along the Southern Freight Corridor. It's because driving a bad truck or a good truck in bad weather is still difficult for human drivers, and so they try to avoid it. And so as we see the technology coming out, it'll follow that common sense approach and that rigorous approach to deployment.
For the record, we get a lot of rain and sleet, but not like 365 days a year, just for the record. With that, I yield back.
Gentleman yields. Mr. LaMalfa.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to compare the potential, and I know there's a lot of safety that is driving this conversation here, but the comparison, let's say, between highways full of trucks and our railroad system, for example. So work has been done to have a better train control over the years, and I know, why are you talking about trains? Well, because railroads have a dedicated lane, so to speak, that only trains are on, pulling, many, many, many tons, and very efficiently in doing so. But they're having difficulty even keeping the safety record perfect on railroads. If they were to be autonomous versus thousands and thousands of trucks all trying to operate off of the same set of satellites or what have you, how in the world are we going to do that with so many vehicles when we have a certain amount of difficulty right now with a lot fewer on a dedicated lane that doesn't have automobiles, doesn't have a whole lot of people on it, doesn't have trucks with drivers? how do we expect to integrate that many vehicles when it's not been that easy with railroads? So why don't you want to tackle that, Mr. Spear?
Yeah, I think, and I'll give some deference to where the technology stands in terms of differentiating between, highways where there are, smoother roads, lines painted, the technology functions, based off of indicators that allow it to perform at an optimal level. I think country roads, rural environments, to delineate between that, I think that's something that would have to evolve much longer than the testing and deployment that we're seeing today.
No, what I'm asking though is we're talking about, it's difficult enough to keep a safety record going on railroads, which are on dedicated tracks, dedicated lanes, so to speak. And now we're talking about many thousands of vehicles,
Yeah.
all trying to operate. How about Mr. Urmson? Would you take a shot at that?
No, thank you for the question. And I think this is one of the places where there's an opportunity where we see to leverage modern technology. So for example, when our trucks are driving down the road, every second they're evaluating thousands of different parameters to ensure that they're operating at peak performance. Whether that's the cycle times for the computation, the health of the sensors, the health of the base platform. And so that level
You're
of
going to have a lot more sensors on a whole freeway system than you already have on, say, lesser miles of railroads with lesser numbers of vehicles, meaning trains. So I'm wondering, how much are you asking for technology to try and move forward with so many independent autonomous vehicles? Yeah, I know truck drivers aren't perfect, but I appreciate them during Truck Driver Appreciation Week. And let me morph this into a rural aspect, as was being touched on here. So do you see this as being primarily something that's being done in urban areas with high volumes of traffic? Because I'm trying to imagine how this is going to work in rural districts like mine, moving mine products or timber products out of the woods onto rural roads, and then meeting larger rural roads and finally interstate, perhaps. Is this going to be adapting well to those conditions?
So again, we don't see this as a big bang deployment all at once. We expect this technology to roll out incrementally, much as Mr. Spear has talked about, to complement other functions or other operators on the roadway. And so we will initially target long-haul trips on interstates. Eventually, I could imagine this technology operating in those environments, but that won't be the initial deployment. And this is how come we have so much confidence that this will be complementary to the skills that our human driving.
Then do you see this as, in the western states, you're frequently going to have, and you were talking about weather a minute ago with heavy snows, rains, lots of rain in the high country. And since so much of the West is on fire, so much of the summer and the fall, how about smoke? I mean, how is that going to interfere with the technology you're speaking of?
No, thank you for the question. And again, here, one of the things I can say is our company was founded in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. It's a part of the nation that has all 4 seasons. And so even in the first year that we were developing the technology, we were out in a parking lot testing in snow. Once again, we're able to constrain the technology. So if the weather is so inclement that it shouldn't operate, then it won't. But the technology, the sensors.
Then we're going to have a backup plan to have available drivers that can operate these autonomous vehicles. It's already difficult enough to have these drivers with so many, the regulations and many other challenges. So we shouldn't run too headlong, too fast into this autonomous situation, which I don't know if it's really seeking a solution to a problem that isn't as huge as would be sold to us. So, Mr. Chairman, I'll yield back. Thank you.
Gentleman yields. Ms. Napolitano, you recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Ms. Chase, in jurisdictions across the country that have started to allow autonomous transit, ride-sharing, and AVs, what have been the results, both positive and negative, on the impact and the safety aspect of them?
Thank you for the question. I'd like to focus first on the negative parts because there's been a lot of conversation today about all of the positive parts of AVs. I think we really need to pay attention to what's happening in real time in San Francisco. And we know that these AVs have interfered with emergency response operators, including 18 incidents documented by the San Francisco Fire Department in which AVs put firefighters and the public at risk. We also know that they have made planned and unplanned stops in travel lanes that have interfered with transit service and blocked traffic. Additionally, intrusions into construction zones where city employees were working have happened, and obstructions caused by AVs have had to interpret and respond to human traffic control officers, police officers. They don't know what to do, especially if you have them, a New York police officer and a police officer in California don't necessarily speak the same way or use the same hand mannerisms. And lastly, erratic driving. One of my staff members actually went to the arts conference in San Francisco and took a ride, 3 rides actually, in driverless cars, and all 3 of them had problems. One of them, he was told to leave the vehicle and that a vehicle would come and get him, and never did. And this was after midnight in San Francisco, which could be potentially dangerous. So these, in short, these are just not ready for prime time. Let me just say, Advocates for Highway and Auto Safety has always been a champion of proven safety technologies, and we hope that someday autonomous vehicles will help to relieve the mounting traffic crash, fatality, and injury toll. But as far as we can tell from data that's been collected from the Standing General Order and from the press and from other sources, it's not happening yet.
Thank you. Mr. Urmson, how important are roadway markings, roadway signs, and maintenance to effective operations of AVs or autonomous trucks? And will the federal government, the state government, local governments have to invest in roadway striping, restriping, and maintenance and the fixed projects in order to make autonomous trucking work?
No, thank you for the question. Our intent in delivering the technologies, it needs to meet the world where it is today. And so if it's good for human drivers, it'll be good for automated vehicles. So there's benefits to road safety of having clear markings for people driving on those roads. If it's good for people, it'll be good for us.
But who does the striping?
Who does the striping? The Department of Transportation, I imagine, does the striping.
And the cost would be a little bit more than normal striping?
No, ma'am. We don't believe that you need to change anything about the striping that's on the roadways today.
Okay, thank you. I'm concerned about the company's application to be exempt from the requirements of placing traditional warning devices around the stop truck. What if the electrical system doesn't work on the truck? What is proposing to do as alternatives? And have you tested if the alternative is safe as traditional warning devices?
So thank you for the question. We see this as a real opportunity to improve roadway safety. That today, if a truck breaks down on the side of the road, someone has to get out into the roadway and put warning triangles behind it. Obviously, our automated vehicles, the intent is to not have an ability to go do that. We have developed we call it a beacon. You can think of it as lights, right? Like on the back of a tow truck. That are on the sides of the truck that indicate that it is stopped in a place where it wouldn't normally be stopped. And we and an independent group have evaluated the performance of that and see that it's as good as putting cones behind or triangles behind the vehicle without exposing someone to the roadway. So we see this as a really important safety advantage.
But what if the electrical system on the truck is not working?
What if the additional system on the truck is not working? Again, thank you for the question. I think someone would have to go and deploy cones at some point behind it, but we're talking about a light, which we think is a relatively straightforward technology to keep working, and the trucks have redundancies in the power that's distributed to them. So you'd have to have many things fail at the same time for that to occur.
Thank you. Mr. Spear, what do you believe will be the impact on the type and number of jobs in the trucking industry by increased automated trucking?
As I said earlier, Congressman, I think that there is an opportunity for both innovation and the existing workforce to coexist. We have a gap. We have a shortage of talent that we're trying to fill just to meet economic demand. So there's a lot of opportunity for innovation to fill that, particularly for driver assist technologies, levels 2, 3, 4, which really empower a driver to be safer in operating their equipment. We're ways yet to see, fully automated driverless trucks out there, but the progression toward that, we believe there's plenty of space without displacing drivers.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Mr. Owens, you're recognized.
Thank you. I first of all want to thank Chairman Crawford for today's hearing and our witness for taking the time to help us, help this subcommittee to better understand this important topic. Innovation in how Americans move and transport goods has long underpinned America's ingenuity. The challenge of keeping our nation's connected commerce flowing manifested early in our nation's history. My home state of Utah is central to this history, fulfilling the manifest destiny of our young nation with the completion of the Transcontinental Railroad. Since then, America has continued to be at the forefront of transportation and logistical innovation, introducing the world to our automobiles, interstate highways, commercial aviation, space exploration, ride sharing, and simply to name a few. Today, the growing prevalence of autonomous vehicles on our highways is the next era of transportation innovation. Automation holds immense promise to enhance safety and efficiency while also stimulating economic growth in our commercial motor vehicle sector. As the pace of technology accelerates, we must embrace these advancements. However, this topic must be approached with caution and with a commitment to addressing complex issues around safety, infrastructure, workforce impact, and cybersecurity. After safety, my constituents are most concerned on the impact of American jobs. This conversation is incomplete without simultaneously exploring strategies for workforce development, training, and ensuring the future includes fulfilling and meaningful employment. My goal is to ensure that our workforce needs and education evolves as this industry evolves. Mr. Unsom, we're losing progress on innovation because of U.S. government isn't keeping pace. Are we losing progress because we're not keeping pace in terms of our government itself? And what steps, I'm sorry, and what steps should Congress take to boost the U.S. AV industry?
Thank you. I've certainly answered to much worse than that, so appreciate the question. As we look at the situation America's in right now in this space, we see that we're leading, that we have this, incredibly gifted people come here, develop this technology, and have a lead. But we know that, for example, China is investing heavily and working hard to ultimately eclipse us. I think that as a nation, we need to continue to foster innovation in this space. There's an opportunity, whether it's, as we've talked about with the warning beacons, to start to see this technology out in the road and deployed, the opportunity to support that with FMCSA. We see an opportunity to continue to harmonize regulations across states, that because the value of this technology is really about deepening interstate commerce, the more consistent regulations are, the easier it will be and the better benefit we'll see from the technology.
Okay, thanks so much. Ms. Spears, what would be the impact if we overregulated or prohibited fully autonomous trucks?
Well, I think what we're looking for is more oversight at the federal level. We've talked a little bit about NHTSA and their standing general order, their ability to exhibit oversight, but we're also talking about commercial vehicles. NHTSA has more of a role in leadership and expertise in passenger vehicles. We need the FMCSA to be more involved and in sync with NHTSA in the development and oversight of this technology. We need a federal framework. It needs to be a performance and safety standard. Don't pick favorites. And we have forward-leaning policies on speed limiters, ELDs, AEB, but we want a performance standard that lets innovation thrive, and we want it to govern all 50 states. We don't want a patchwork of rules that are confusing, not only to innovation, but to our industry's ability to adopt it. So your ability to hand DOT, particularly NHTSA and FMCSA, the structure, the staff, the resources, so that they have the expertise to oversee a federal framework. Make it a performance standard. That's something that we all understand and can measure. You're going to have more data coming in. You all are going to have much better oversight in understanding where this is trending if you give us that federal framework. So that would be something that we would recommend. Our testimony exhibits that.
We have the last few seconds. What would be the result if we ceded leadership in this industry to China? And I'm going to, Mr. Farrell, would you mind maybe addressing that?
Thank you, Congressman. I'd be happy to. And I want to underscore what Mr. Urmson said about competition with China. The reality is that China wants to be the world leader when it comes to autonomous vehicle technology. We need to make sure that that doesn't happen. We need to make sure the United States is the global leader. It means Congress working on a bipartisan basis with FMCSA on making sure that we've got clarity on important rules. This hearing is an important piece of that, and certainly appreciate the opportunity to talk with you today about that.
Okay. Thank you, and I'll yield back.
Gentleman yields. Mr. Johnson of Georgia.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Chase, safety on our highways has long been a priority of mine. In previous Congresses, I introduced the Safe Roads Act, which would mandate automatic emergency braking systems for tractors, tractor trailers, 18-wheelers with electronic stability control technology. This critical piece of legislation became a part of the bipartisan infrastructure law. While our goal is to prevent crashes of all types, a mechanical or other failure on an 80,000-pound tractor-trailer truck or a 55-passenger bus or a hazmat truck filled with propane gas can be catastrophic, particularly when compared to the consequences of a simple automobile wreck. Ms. Chase, do you believe that prudence requires that we should be even more cautious about deploying level 3, 4, and 5 automated commercial motor vehicles on our roads than we should be about the deployment of autonomous automobiles, and if so, why?
Thank you for your question, Congressman. Also, thank you very much for your safety leadership. We appreciate that you have made it a priority in your portfolio to make sure that the roads are safer for your constituents and everyone in the country. So thank you very much. Yes, I think absolutely we need prudence when we're discussing autonomous vehicles of any level. What we know so far is that, the biggest sample that we have so far is San Francisco. And it's not going so well, to say the least. When we have the San Francisco fire chief coming out publicly and saying that she has tremendous trepidation about what's happening on her roadways because it's imperiling firefighters to get to their scenes, it's a problem. We can't just stick our head in the sand and pretend that these real problems aren't happening. So when you talk about
emergency vehicle, like a ambulance dispatched to pick up or to tend to a elderly patient having a heart attack or an infant that swallowed a button or something, that kind of vehicle, or a fire truck having trouble getting to the destination to put out the fire or to render life and death aid to a person. We're having automated vehicles are interfering with that process?
Yes, it is. In fact, in addition to the fire trucks, there was a live crime shooting scene in San Francisco, and the police department could not get to the shooting scene because of obstructions of autonomous vehicles. So we need to deal with these known problems. We know these problems exist. We can't just move forward.
So we need to be careful as we move forward.
Yes, sir.
We certainly know that automated vehicles are coming, but we need to be careful about rolling them out and deploying them on our streets. You've heard the argument that deployment of autonomous trucks on the road will actually reduce motor vehicle crashes. What are your thoughts on that assertion?
Well, maybe they can. We don't know yet. And
Not yet.
Not yet. Not yet. We're not there yet.
I got you. Okay, let me move on to Mr. Urmson. Aurora has publicly supported laws which liberalized autonomous vehicle operations, but which also impose liability on an AV certificate holder for negligence arising from the operation of Aurora Driver. Is that correct?
I believe so, yes.
And do you believe that that common sense liability requirement should be adopted nationally?
No, thank you for the question. As we look at the regulatory regime here and the liability regime, we see a legal system that actually is robust and works, and that we've introduced new products across the last century, and they've all been able to fall under the current tort system, and we anticipate that this technology is no different, that product liability is a mechanism that will work well here.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Spear, I heard you say it during your testimony that displacement of workers is a myth. How do you contend that that statement is true?
Because there's no data to back up that we are going to displace workers. We have a gap. We have a
Taking
shortage.
drivers out of the, my colleague,
There's no evidence of that, Congressman. None.
you're gonna then have drivers.
When you have a shortage of
these
78,000 drivers, there's plenty of space for innovation to play a role. We've got to add talent.
Eventually, you would eliminate all drivers, though, correct?
I'm not bought into that. We've got to add 1.2 million drivers over the next 10 years. How are you going to do that if we can't add more people behind the wheel? There is a role for innovation to fill that gap, and it will not displace drivers. We'll take them. If you can give me 1.2 million, I'll take them. They're not out there.
Well, maybe if we stop testing for marijuana, which stays in the blood for 30 days.
I don't want people high behind the wheel of an 8,000
Gentleman's time's
vehicle.
expired.
Blood for 30
Gentleman's
days,
time's
the person
expired.
is not high.
Yeah, I can't get behind that.
Gentleman's time's expired. Mr.
At least
Yakum.
think about it.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to our witnesses for lending your expertise on this important issue. Autonomous vehicles are an exciting and intriguing technology, but this is also a topic that requires a lot of education and thoughtful consideration. I'd like to follow up on one of Chairman Crawford's earlier questions and comments on cybersecurity as it pertains to autonomous vehicles, because I think that in a lot of ways, it's core not just to security, but also to the safety and the overall confidence in autonomous vehicles. There are a lot of roads we can go down in this conversation, whether it's safeguarding data, ensuring privacy, preventing hacking and hijacking, protecting trade secrets, and probably many more. But I would like to kind of drill down here on a few of these specifics. And maybe Mr. Ermsman or Mr. Farah, could one or both of you talk about what measures are being taken place in the autonomous vehicle industry to ensure privacy? When I say privacy, maybe be specific to things like user locations or cameras and privacy for, camera privacy, things like that. Can you maybe expound on that a little bit, please?
Maybe I could start and then turn it to Mr. Farr to talk broadly. So I can talk about what we're doing at Aurora. So today we're compliant with all of the privacy requirements that are, that we have to comply with that are out there, and that we actually have a robust policy in place to respond to law enforcement requests for data from our vehicles.
Congressman, certainly appreciate the interest. This is something that's a core tenet of the industry. I'll say that what Mr. Ermston said, from my perspective, seems to be applicable across the industry. There's a deep commitment to cybersecurity, a lot of investment that goes into this. There are particular ways that we mitigate against cybersecurity intrusions that we can follow up for the record and give additional information. Specific to data privacy, obviously these vehicles are out on the roads and needing to collect data to make the performance safe. That's something that is critically important. We realize that a lot of responsibility comes with that. There are a host of measures that are taken across the industry, and again, we can provide more specifics after this hearing.
Great, thank you. And also to Mr. Ermson and Mr. Farah, could one or both of you talk about what measures are being taken in the autonomous vehicle industry to safeguard against hijacking threats? I mean, what happens if there's a breach in cybersecurity? Is it possible for someone remote to actually take over and commandeer a vehicle remotely?
Congressman, I'll begin, and maybe Mr. Ermson wants to share his perspective from his company. What I will say is that these vehicles are the most monitored vehicles on the road. Obviously, there's a tremendous amount of capital investment, technological investment that has gone into them. They are under the custody of the companies. These are fleet managed, and so the companies themselves have control over them. There are command centers, obviously, that are making sure that these are being treated appropriately. The other thing that's important to underscore here is that these vehicles cannot just go anywhere, anytime. There is a specific operational design domain. This is a set of limiting circumstances, whether it's geographical, whether it's other types of circumstances, and so they are confined to that space. All this goes to making sure that they are going where they need to go, making sure that they are not being used inappropriately, they're not subjected to cybersecurity intrusion, and so this is something where there's very strong alignment from the industry as well as policymakers.
And again, thank you for the question. Just talking concretely about what Aurora does, we have this technology we call the fault management system, and that's this part of the Aurora Driver that's monitoring constantly all different systems. One of the things it's looking for is our various cybersecurity checks. And when it comes to remote operation of the vehicle, we actually follow best practices on how you can connect to the vehicle, and we can constrain what's expressed. So there isn't somebody with a Logitech steering wheel somewhere steering the thing down the road. We can ask, the interface looks much more like a taxi dispatcher, communicating information that's kind of not critical real time to the truck about what might be beneficial for it.
Great. And finally, can one of you briefly talk about what steps are being taken to prevent this technology from falling into the hands of one of our adversaries? Let's say someone like China, who we know is world-renowned for intellectual property theft.
And again, thank you for the question. For us, that's our business, right, is the intellectual property. And so for us, we take that seriously. We have what we think is a world-class team. It's about 50 people that are working on both the cybersecurity of our corporate infrastructure, but also on the product infrastructure.
Right.
I'll just say, Congressman, very briefly, I know we're at time here, but this really underscores why it's important for policymakers to support the development of the American autonomous vehicle industry. We need to make sure these jobs are here, these companies are here, we've got a robust supply chain, and we're very happy to have this conversation today.
Great. Thank you. And Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Gentleman yields. Mr. Stanton.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, for holding this hearing, and thank you for each of the witnesses for your great testimony today. Arizona generally, and my district specifically in the East Valley, have been at the epicenter for the development and testing of autonomous vehicles. Autonomous vehicles have the potential to transform our transportation system, improve mobility for vulnerable populations and those who face barriers to transportation, enhance vehicle safety, reduce vehicle crashes and death, increase productivity. At the same time, we need to recognize that AVs have the potential to alter our workforce. My questions, the first one is for Mr. Urmson, Mr. Farah, and Mr. Spear. Choose if you want to each of you answer or just one of you. How are you engaging with truck drivers who have extensive experience driving millions of miles as this technology is being developed?
So truck drivers are critical to how we develop this technology. Today we have 40-some of them on staff at Aurora. It's important to me they're actually employees of the company. They own equity in the company. As the company's successful, we anticipate them benefiting from that success as well. If you look at someone like Tom Randall, who's on our staff, he's driven for 40 years. He sees the opportunity to introduce new technology into a career that he has loved. And that experience translates directly into the way we develop the technology. His quality driving on the road is what we model the behavior and what the Aurora Driver learns from so that they can drive well and safely down the road.
Is fair?
Congressman, thank you very much and appreciate your leadership on this policy area. I will say that I think today's hearing is an incredibly important moment because we need to be clear as an industry that the autonomous vehicle industry needs truck drivers. We see a strong role for coexistence. This is something where we are not a panacea. We want to be a tool to help with supply chain challenges, and so recognize that certainly there are questions out there, and we're eager to have the opportunity today to clarify that.
That's right. Mr. Spear?
Well, they're skills. We're teaching drivers to operate at a much higher level. These are marketable skills, these are portable skills, but we're enabling these drivers to be more aware, more responsive. Some of the most basic things that we talked about, like automated emergency braking to adaptive cruise control, to more integrated systems. We're teaching not only the drivers, but the technicians how to service this equipment. These are all things that are going to allow increased pay. These are all things that are going to make this workforce more talented and marketable. These are all good things. We should not stymie innovation. We should encourage it. So that federal framework that is performance-based is going to help our workforce by giving them more skills. The quality of life, too, I'd point out, is we lose $74.5 billion a year sitting in traffic. That's 425,000 drivers sitting idle for an entire year. Connectivity, vehicle to vehicle, vehicle to infrastructure, these are all things that will eliminate that congestion and improve the quality of life and also improve our economy. So there's a tremendous role for automation and connectivity to really impact our workforce as well as our economy.
Similar question, does the current workforce have the skills necessary to operate automated technology, or will fleets need to undertake significant retraining or recruitment of new drivers? Mark?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. Listen, I think our workforce is very excited about giving them new skills. We're giving them an opportunity to optimize their performance. If you're teaching a driver how to operate an 80,000-pound vehicle with more command, more control, more awareness, more responsiveness, they're going to be better at their job. The motoring public is going to be safer. And I would incorporate equality between commercial vehicles and passenger vehicles. 2/3 of the accidents that involve our trucks are caused by passenger vehicles. They're speeding and they're texting. They're not paying attention and they're running into the vehicle. AEB, connectivity, these are all things that are going to save lives. We want to take a massive cut out of those 40,000 fatalities. And we believe that our workforce being properly trained is going to have a measurable impact on doing just that.
All right, Ms. Farah?
Congressman, I should just clarify that I think what's important to understand here is that all of the jobs needed to maintain trucks today, these are ones that we still need in the future. But we also need additional jobs specifically at these companies. We need people that are helping to maintain the fleet, work with the technology. What we see across the board at members of AVIA is that they are working very closely in their communities on training programs so that they can have that talent work for their workforce. And so that's just another way we're adding more jobs.
That's great. Mr. Armstrong, please.
Yeah, and just to follow on for that, so we've concretely, we've worked with the Pittsburgh Technical College where we've put in place a training program for vehicle service technicians. We've worked with Gallatin College where we're working on sensor technician accreditation and education. And then importantly, at the company itself, we've created pathways for folks to move from our operations team into other roles of the company, program management and other aspects of it, to create that mobility for these critical employees for us.
That's great. Looks like I ran out of time here, so I'll submit my final question for a written answer. I yield back.
Gentleman yields. Mr. Stauber.
Thank you very much. Mr. Spear, I really appreciate you bringing up the fact that crashes involved, many crashes are a result of automobile drivers with texting and what have you. We have to recognize the danger of that. And I think that our professional truck drivers across this country see it every day, and it's horrendous. Having been a former police officer, I was to many violent crashes because of the inattentive drivers and texting. So thank you very much for bringing that up. I also want to take a moment to acknowledge that this is National Truck Driver Appreciation Week. Our truck drivers are critical to our supply chains. They keep our economy afloat. They work around the clock to ensure that we want for nothing. And I am thankful to all of our truck drivers, not just today, but every day, for their professionalism and their safety on the roads. You know, as we talk about automated trucking, it is important that development of this technology, I believe, must be done in consultation and coordination with our truck drivers. They have years of experience driving millions of miles and certainly know what is needed for safety. Now for my question. Truck driving provides a great income and it's a great profession. We have many truck drivers in Minnesota, but what would you say to someone who is concerned that this technology will limit their employment opportunities in the future? Mr. Spear?
I'd point out that we have a responsibility as an industry now moving 72.5% of the domestic freight in this country to meet economic demand. We're consuming more. We're adding more people to our economy that are going to buy more goods, and we have to move those goods. So as that gap grows between consumption and our industry's ability to move those goods to where they need to be, we have a gap. We have a gap of talent that we need to add. And if we can't add people behind the wheel, there is a role for innovation to play without displacing anyone. So I don't look at this through the lens of displacement. I think there's plenty of room for innovation to solve problems, improve safety, improve performance, quality of life. These are all good things for our workforce to grow into.
So, Mr. Spear, you would look that professional Minnesota truck driver in the eye and say, you will not lose your job because of automation?
I would. I wouldn't hesitate. In fact, I think it's going to empower that driver, certainly levels 2, 3, 4 are going to make them more marketable, give them better performance. These are all exciting inroads that we want to see in our industry. If we were flooded with drivers, if we had an abundance of people behind the wheel, we would be having this conversation very differently than we are today. But I do believe there's a role for innovation to play without displacing those drivers. I'd look them in the eye and tell them, you've got nothing to be concerned about.
Thank you. Truck driving in Minnesota and many of the northern climates the weather changes suddenly. We can be in Minnesota and all of a sudden the snowstorm hits like immediately and black ice. And you're smiling, Mr. Spear, because you've been there and you've heard the driver say that. And that's in all the northern climates. But I know we're still early in the stages, but where does this technology stand with varying weather conditions like icy roads in northern Minnesota or black ice or fog right away? Near Lake Superior, the fog can come in and you can't see 20 feet in front of you. Where do you see that technology fitting in?
I think it's an evolution. I mean, technology is going to evolve. I'm smiling because I'm from Wyoming. I've been to Minnesota too, and we have the exact same. We have 2 weeks of really good weather, and the rest of it is hit and miss. So.
We have one great week.
Yeah, one? Okay. Well, we got 1 week on you. But look, I think there are a lot of variables beyond that wind, high wind. There's a lot of variables that have to be taken into account. I think what these gentlemen are demonstrating is that they're properly testing this in environments that are conducive to the technology as it stands. We're running lanes in the Southwest. It's a very good environment from Texas to California to test this equipment. And as it evolves, as it gets better and the performance can take into account these weather variables, you're going to see more of it operating in states like ours. But I defer to them on that. But I think they're doing this responsibly. They're doing it with government, hand in glove to make sure that we're getting it right. And we're not putting anybody on the motoring public in jeopardy. So I think it's an evolution.
And I think that it's comforting to know that you're bringing the professional drivers into for consultation and advice. I think that's a very good way to move forward. So I yield back. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Gentleman yields, Mr. Garcia.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thanks to all the witnesses this morning. The automated trucks that we're talking about this morning are way upwards of 80,000 pounds. They're massive, heavy, and not particularly agile machines. So when crashes happen, the risks are immense, especially to the communities that they drive through. As everyone here knows, Chicago is at the heart of our nation's transportation network, and the district I represent, Illinois 4th, is crisscrossed by major truck routes. Every day, huge freight trucks run through bustling neighborhoods, down streets that kids cross for school, and feet away from people's front door. So with that, I'd like to ask my first question to Ms. Chase. It's my understanding that all a vehicle needs to do to comply with existing federal legislation is, one, have basic operating equipment. We're talking about a steering wheel and pedals. And two, report certain incidents to the NHTSA. Am I accurate in saying that is about as much oversight as the federal government would have?
Yes, sir, you are correct. And if I could give an example of what is needed, a standard that is needed. Right now, when a person goes to get a driver's license or a CDL, you have to take a vision test. So with the truck taking over this capability, there's no current requirements that it be able to see and respond to the roadway environment like a human does now. And while my current panelists, I have great promise. They're speaking about great promise for this technology. We're not there yet, and we don't know. We need the assurance of government regulations to make sure that it can be accomplished safely.
So it seems that those regulations don't address the fact that AV trucks don't just rely on steering wheels or pedals. Instead, they use a set of systems to make sophisticated decisions about the driving environment. Given that, do you think that the same basic measures can be used to adequately regulate automated commercial vehicles?
I think that we need new additional safety standards when we're talking about automated trucks. These are very sophisticated systems, and they can be prone to cybersecurity hacks. They can be prone to, multiple disengagements and different problems on the roads. So without the assurance of standards, we don't know how they're going to perform. One company might do a great job, another company not so much, and it's the motoring public that's put in danger if we don't have that security.
So, of course, truck drivers who are noticeably absent from this witness panel so far are the ones with the actual experience and expertise in the cabin. How can regulators ensure that workers have a strong voice in regulating the deployment of new technologies since they are the ones actually using them?
Oh, I think all stakeholders should be involved in this process. In fact, one of the best things that I've done during my tenure at Advocates is I did a ride-along with a truck driver, and I experienced what it was like to be on the road, and it's such a different perspective than a car driver. You're so much higher. There's so many more responsibilities, and that voice is essential to have in the room to share what their experiences are on the roads.
Thank you. I'm trying to squeeze one more question in. This one is for Mr. Farah and Mr. Urmson, if you can be brief. Earlier, I spoke about the huge size of these vehicles and the correspondingly huge risk to nearby communities. But it's not just the size of these trucks that presents a danger, it's what's inside them, too. We've all seen stories of crashes and truck explosions sending toxic fumes high into the air, forcing entire communities to evacuate. Should driverless vehicles ever be used to transport hazardous materials?
Congressman, thank you much for the question. I'll try and be brief here. First, I think that I'd like to follow up for the record with some additional information about requirements that are needed at both at a federal level and state level. This is a highly regulated industry. I think that there's a little bit of context that we need to provide. Second, I'm not aware of companies that are doing placarded hazardous material delivery at this point. Certainly, I understand that that's, again, a very highly regulated space, and would be happy to follow up with you and talk about that further.
And Mr. Urmson?
Yeah, I would say, again, I would characterize the regulatory environment as a little different than as was expressed. I think it's important to understand that the federal motor vehicle safety standards exist and apply to these vehicles, and this is a regulation with hundreds of pages. And there's an ability for the federal government to exert, to remove vehicles from the road if they create their unreasonable risk on the roadway. And so that is in there and is a backstop as needed.
Thank you, and I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Garcia. The chair now recognizes Mr. Edwards for 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Correction, Mr. Edwards, I'm sorry, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
All right, thank you. Ms. Chase, I can't help but think, as you made your comment about you doing the ride-along with a truck driver. My dad was a truck driver, and so as a child, I've done hundreds of thousands of miles as a ride-along. And it is a very interesting perspective, that way of life. Mr. Urmson, I'm curious. I'm trying to visualize how these trucks would operate, and it seems like because there's some real fine maneuvers at the end of the line would be required. At what point does the automation end and someone climb in the cab and start doing the fine turns and that sort of thing that would be required to get to the final destination?
Yeah, thank you for the question. The technology we're developing today, the Aurora Driver, will basically drive gate to gate. So it'll leave a terminal, get through the industrial park, onto the freeway, head down the freeway, come off and get into the terminal through the industrial park.
You say terminal. Is there like a certain parking place? At some point, it seems like somebody's got to get behind the wheel and start working that thing around to a dock that is requires a very specific skill. I've watched my dad and many others do it over and over again, and it looks impossible. I have a difficult time imagining a machine or any sort of automation being able to do that.
No, it is an incredibly skilled job and really important, obviously. And yes, we expect the Aurora driver to deliver the truck and the trailer, or the tractor and the trailer, to the yard, and then someone at that point will maneuver it in the yard to take it to the dock.
Thank you. Also, this question for you, Mr. Urmson. China is America's lead competitor in the race to automated vehicle technology, and for hundreds of reasons, not the least of which is the valuable data collected and transmitted by this technology. It's imperative that the U.S. maintain our lead. Is there anything inhibiting America's development of autonomous vehicles that may assist China in deploying their technology before the U.S.?
I do believe we're leading today, but that lead is fragile. Again, I think that there's an opportunity to harmonize regulation across states. I think taking a strong voice of support from the federal government and obviously oversight from this committee of agencies like FMCSA and NHTSA and help encourage them to put in place ultimately performance-based regulation is the right step.
And so specifically, what would you recommend Congress be able to do to help secure America's place at the forefront of this technology?
I'd be happy to weigh in there, Congressman. I think that the one big piece of this, and first of all, completely agree with you, we're very aligned on the idea that China is our nearest competitor here, and we need to make sure that we're all rowing in the same direction. One big thing that Congress can do is we would like to see FMCSA take action on a notice of proposed rulemaking specific to autonomous trucking. We think this is something that there should be very strong bipartisan support for. This is something where there are certain open questions in the industry that we would like to see clarified that will give a lot of confidence so that our members can continue to make significant capital investments, technological advancement investments to make sure this technology moves forward in the United States.
And so I'll direct this next question to Mr. Urmson, and if you feel somebody else on this panel is more qualified to answer that, please point us in the right direction. It seems like this technology will require a significant investment, and that most likely it will be larger companies that will be able to take advantage of it, and that smaller companies and startups could maybe be crowded out. Can you give us any perspective on how you might see small businesses, small operators, and startups affected by this technology?
Certainly, and as a company that's fought to be an independent company and grown from 3 people now to 1,800, certainly value that. And I think that independence is absolutely critical because a large company has some mission, and it may not be, and it almost certainly isn't, delivering the benefits of this technology. And so that independence has allowed us to operate and build what we think is going to be a very important business. As we bring the Aurora Driver to market, we're intending to bring it to market in a way where you'll be able to buy a truck, and then you'll have a subscription to the Aurora Driver, and so it reduces the capital needs up front in getting access to this technology, and we hope that that will help everyone get benefit from it.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I see my time is up, so I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Edwards. Chair now recognizes the gentlewoman from Nevada, Ms. Titus, for 5 minutes.
Oh, thank you very much. As you heard, I represent Nevada, and for over 3 decades, the federal government's left open the possibility of Yucca Mountain, and that means a lot of hazardous, high-level radioactive waste would be transported on trucks. Some might come on trains, but most will probably come on trucks. I wonder if you could maybe address if driverless vehicles should be allowed to carry hazardous materials, especially something as dangerous as nuclear waste. Anybody? Mr. Urmson? Or?
Congressman, I'll start. First of all, thank you for your leadership on autonomous vehicles, and Nevada's certainly been a national leader on this issue.
I was just out front on getting something through the legislature on these vehicles. Thank you for mentioning that.
Yeah. And certainly your state is seeing a lot of the benefits of that already. I would say I'm not aware of companies that are in the hazardous material space right now. I understand there are additional regulations that come with moving that, and so we would obviously need to comply with that. Happy to give you a sense of the market developments as they play out.
Thank you. Anybody else?
I would just say that, Congresswoman, when you look at hazardous materials, if you look at livestock, if you look at produce, there are certain things that can fall prey to certain conditions, so extreme heat, as you're well aware of in your state. So I also am not aware of anybody that is operating, autonomy with respect to hazardous, but I think there are a lot of applications that are going to come last once that technology has been fully adopted and deployed before we see it applied to things like hazardous materials, livestock, produce, things that are going to require the attention of a driver. There are just conditions that unfold unexpectedly that are going to need that driver's attention, which is why I think we're all saying that we need to work with our current and future driver force to make sure those applications have eyes on.
Absolutely not. Hazardous materials should not be transported by autonomous vehicles that are unproven, untested, and still unreliable. It's frankly scary enough to think about an 80,000-pound truck being driven autonomously. Think about putting hazardous materials in it. It could be catastrophic. So until we have the regulations and the safeguards that are needed put into place, there's no way that hazmat should be transported autonomously.
Commercial trucks have to follow a lot of regulations and reporting a lot of data on safety. With the driverless vehicles, what kind of data should be reported and who should have access to that data?
So I can just talk about what we report today. So we report to federal and state officials. We're very transparent about it. As part of the standing general order, we've reported 3 incidents with our trucks. 2 of them were incidents where debris was thrown up and from the road by another truck on the road and hit one of our vehicles. The third was an incident where we believe the operator of a light vehicle dozed off for a moment and then sideswiped across multiple lanes, contacted our truck, and then went off. And fortunately, everyone walked away. It's about as good a collision as you can have between a light vehicle and a truck. In that situation, I think it highlights, again, the available data, and we've shared this. We actually posted this, explained it, the response. If you look at the state of the art today in understanding these events, it's something like a driver monitoring system. And when you look at this event in that film, you have no idea what happened. At some moment, you see the driver tense, and that's it. With our technology, we're able to observe that other vehicle move across multiple lanes of traffic. We see our vehicle respond or begin to respond. Note the moment the collision occurred. Our vehicle immediately began its emergency response procedures. Our drivers very quickly thereafter took over to execute their response procedures. And we understood exactly what happened. And again, we've shared this transparently.
Congresswoman, I would echo what Mr. Urmson said about the standing general order. This is a robust data reporting regime that the autonomous vehicle has lived under for more than 2 years. This information is transparently available on the NHTSA website. This is something that policymakers can look at. Certainly, our industry shares this out whenever we can. I think the other piece that's really important is that 23 states have proactively allowed autonomous vehicles on their roads. And so in those states, including Nevada, where our members are operating, there is a deep level of engagement with state departments of transportation, with police forces. And so this is something that's it's very much a relationship that we want to continue to have, and something that I think we're very transparent about.
I know you'll have a few more seconds, but I just want to add that we think there needs to be even more transparency. The data collected by the Standing General Order is a step in the right direction, but there's a lot of redaction happening. So we don't really have a clear picture of what's happening on our roadways in terms of disengagements, crashes, and other incidents on the roadways.
Thank you. Something we don't have time to talk about, but I wonder about liability. Is it the person who makes the truck, person who's running the truck, person who owns the truck? How was all that insurance issue going to be resolved? Maybe we could talk about that another time. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Ms. Titus. The chair now recognizes Mr. Burleson from Missouri for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Spear, it was said that if we suddenly enter into the world or a situation where we do have driverless vehicles, that the jobs won't be displaced. Can you elaborate on how the industry has demand in other aspects?
We've long dealt with a shortage of talent, both drivers, technicians, beyond. COVID certainly inflated that. Now you're seeing all segments of employment dealing with shortages of employment, and we need more skills. We need more people to fill these roles. And Our ability as an industry to meet economic demand for the foreseeable future depends on attracting more talent into our industry, whether they're young talent, replacing the aging, retiring talent. This is an ongoing challenge that's going to impact our ability to, move that 72.5% of the domestic freight. That gap is widening between the demand and our ability to meet it. So innovation has a role to play there, and developing driver assist technologies into level 5 fully autonomous vehicles, we don't view that as a threat. There's plenty of room for both to play. We're going to have to still meet that demand somehow, whether we can add that 1.2 million people over the next 10 years or we're supplementing it with technology. Either way, I would look any driver in the eye and say, I do not believe your job is at threat.
Right. And none of it would happen overnight as well.
Correct.
Right? These kind of technological advances happen over generations. When you look at the advent of one could ask the question, should Eli Whitney have not invented the cotton gin? Because think about how many workers were displaced ultimately over generations by the advent of technology like that, or harvesters. I mean, your ancestors more than likely were farmers. Mine were. Everyone was farming because that's the only job there was, and it took an enormous amount of labor. But what they weren't able to do are things like go into insurance, go into banking, all the innumerable job opportunities or job titles that exist today did not exist 100 years ago when everyone had to be on the farm, correct? That's right. And so to me, it's to deny the opportunity, really the growth opportunity for individuals is what America is denying. The opportunity to go into the new frontier, to see what, Mr. Spear, let me ask this, if the United States didn't allow this, it's still going to happen technologically, correct, in other countries?
Absolutely. It's already happening, as we talked about in China, but I've been over in Europe. This is being developed, deployed, and this is going to happen somewhere in the world, and it's going to put us at a disadvantage if we don't keep pace with it. And so developing it, innovating it, it has safety benefits. We need to do it right, though. We're not doing this haphazard. It's an evolution, and it will take time. We need to do it responsibly, which is why we're having this hearing. Create that federal framework. Allow interstate commerce. Don't have a patchwork of requirements. Have a seamless 50-state standard on performance. Allow these agencies to work collaboratively with our industry and feed you, as the oversight committee, the information you need to make sure this is being done right. Not only safely, but that we're not compromising our ability to compete. We don't want to concede our standing in the world. We need to maintain it. We need to lead. Innovating is key to that. So if you want to compete, work with us. We'll work with you, and developing that standard will go a long way to doing just that.
Thank you. Mr. Urmson, is that right? Urmson?
Close enough.
Okay, sorry, sir.
Thank you.
You're with Aurora. I wanted to kind of geek out with you about the technology, if that's okay. So this is often, it's developed is it available in a cloud environment and then is downloaded to the client side for vehicles?
Yeah, so the Aurora Driver, first, thank you for the question. The Aurora Driver is a combination of software and hardware, and we have to work closely with our OEM partners who make the trucks so that we can plug it in.
And your technology is getting better and better and better.
Consistently better.
Probably at an exponential rate, correct?
No, it certainly was not an expert to begin with, but at this point, we're driving very well down the freeway.
And the question, I think that we are likely to end up in a day where, and someone can chime in on this if they like, where the vehicles will be driving statistically more safe than a human being. And I have a feeling there's going to be a point in time in which insurance companies actually charge a premium to individuals who choose to drive their vehicle themselves.
And I think we're already starting to see some of the signs of this. I talked earlier about the benefits that we've seen where we've taken the Aurora Driver and simulated how it would have responded to 29 fatal collisions that happened where we expect the technology to first launch, and it would have avoided all of them. And that's 29 plus families that wouldn't have lost a loved one. I think that's incredibly important.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Burleson. The chair now recognizes The gentlewoman from Ohio, Ms. Sykes, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to our witnesses for your testimony. You've had some very fascinating discussions, including the importance of fostering American leadership here in this field, to the potential to save drivers' lives, which is a goal that we all have, and certainly the fuel cost savings, which is important. And I'm from Ohio. We have the 7th highest amount of centerline miles in the country, so there's a lot of trucking and just transportation generally going through our state. And all of these are really important, and I really want to focus on the safety of our citizens here and the public safety. In particular, I had a meeting with some local elected officials, and one of the township trustees from Macedonia Township back at home, who is a former law enforcement officer, highlighted the many trucking accidents that he saw in his former profession, where heavy trucks were a part of crashes and death and destruction followed. And he talked very graphically about what it was like for him working on that, and shared concerns with the increasing weight of trucks and how that impacts these crashes. And so if you could talk a bit, and maybe Ms. Chase, this is a question for you, about the safety of autonomous trucking with these very heavy trucks, and what does that mean when our law enforcement officers or individual citizens are potentially impacted literally and physically because of an accident that might happen on a highway or a roadway?
Thank you so much for your question, and thank you especially for bringing up the perspective of law enforcement and crash victims. I think those are two essential voices to have when we're talking about truck crash safety and also autonomous trucks. So when we consider autonomous trucks, we really need to think about a number of factors, including the roadway environment, the skill level of a safety driver behind the wheel, and also the different impacts such as weather and some issues that have been brought up today. I want to talk about what you just raised, which is truck size and weight. You can't defy the law of physics. If you have a heavier truck, then there is going to be more of an impact in a crash and when a crash occurs. So I think it's really incumbent upon our leaders to pay attention to when special interests are asking for exceptions from truck size and weights, that there's a very real-world consequence when these trucks are made heavier, and also in the realm of autonomous trucks.
Thank you for that answer. And again, staying on the topic of the human element here, a couple of weeks ago, I introduced an amendment with a bipartisan amendment to ensure that there were signs in new builds to acknowledge human trafficking. And sometimes our truckers are first line of defense against human trafficking. Unfortunately, in Ohio, we've seen a lot of it, probably just because there's so much transportation going in and out of our states. But I know that we will lose some of that if we do not have human beings engaging in this in the same kind of way. But I want to pivot a little bit for the sake of time, because there's a little bit of conflicting evidence about how this will impact people's jobs and whether or not we will see a significant reduction in trucking employment. And I have my thoughts, but I want to hear it from all of you. Again, I represent Ohio's 13th congressional district, and hundreds of workers in Copley and Richfield were recently laid off by Yellow when they shut down abruptly last month. And so my question to really anyone who is willing to answer it is, can you truly look me in the eye and tell me with any degree of certainty that we are not going to lose jobs, thousands of good-paying jobs in Ohio's 13th congressional district in Ohio and across the country due to autonomous vehicles? Because we are, all of us as members of Congress, we have to ensure that we have the space for and an environment for jobs. People are talking to us all the time about jobs, how much things are costing, and if people don't have a job, they obviously cannot pay for the goods and services, the rent, the drugs, the prescriptions that they need. And it makes me uncomfortable to go back home and to look at truckers who had just been laid off, to say that we had a hearing on autonomous vehicles knowing that they need to be absorbed into another trucking company, but Congress instead is looking to automate their jobs and they may not have anything to go to. So if anyone has a response, I'm sorry, I know I took a lot of the time here, but happy to hear any response we have in the next 6 seconds.
I quickly will look you in the eye and tell you that displacement is not a concern. We see zero evidence of that other than baseless rhetoric and emotion. We are not seeing any evidence of that. And the reason is that we have a shortage of talent. It's a growing shortage of talent. As long as that exists, innovation has a place to thrive in terms of supplementing our industry's ability to meet economic demand. I would also point to a 2021
The gentlewoman's
US
time has expired.
Sorry,
Chair now
Congressman.
recognizes Mr. Williams from the great state of New York for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My discussion really is about technology, so Mr. Urmson, Mr. Farrar, I'd focus it on you, but Ms. Chase and Mr. Spear, please contribute as you like. I'm very concerned about that we're able to maintain America's leadership in automated vehicles. This covers many domains, including air and commercial vehicles, like we're talking about here, as well as cars and trucks that we drive every day. There's a lot of good issues been raised today. It's employment, workforce readiness and availability, safety. All of these kinds of issues are absolutely relevant to this conversation. Certainly, small businesses, mom and pop trucking companies. Lots of important things that have been discussed. But my focus today is really to draw attention again to America's leadership, and specifically ensuring that we have a strong supply chain here in America to support the growth of this industry. Simply put, I want American workers building automated vehicles in America, and I want them supplied with American components that also are built right here. And one of the key things that I'd like to focus on specifically is the amount of data that is generated by automated vehicles. I've often heard them described as rolling data centers. There was a quote from the former CEO of Intel who said that automated vehicles will generate 4 terabytes of data per day. And I can say that that's 16 times more than the storage I have on my relatively modern iPhone. That's a lot of data, and we're seeing that actually pervasive throughout our entire economy and throughout the digital economy. There are a number of kind of chips that go into these vehicles. Some cost just a few cents. Maybe it's in our cars today, like an oxygen sensor. But increasingly, we have very sophisticated computer chips required to process artificial intelligence, machine learning, very complex calculations in real time, certainly for safety. But along with that, and as you may know, if I can point again to some common standard like our iPhones, we have a chip, a logic chip, if you follow that kind of thing, an A7, an A8, whatever the latest is. But then you have storage and memory. And I really want to pay attention to not only the amount of data that's being created, but how it gets stored and processed. So can anyone really address the challenge of dealing with this amount of data that's being generated by this innovation?
Congressman, thank you very much. Maybe I could begin, and if others want to chime in. I think there's a few very important themes that I really want to echo that you said. I think the first is around American leadership. The reality is that we are in a dogfight with other countries in terms of making sure that we are the leaders in this space. I think that what comes along with American leadership here is making sure that we do have the leading companies here in the United States. We have a robust supply chain that can supply a lot of those companies. We have the right employees that can ultimately power a lot of these going forward. And so that is
the part of that I'm focusing on is specifically around data. So I'm trying to drive the conversation specifically around the data component. It just happens to be of interest to me.
And certainly, you're correct that these AVs are ultimately gathering a lot of data and using a lot of data. Something that the computing power is obviously tremendous, and so the industry is very committed to making sure that we're protecting that, making sure that we have the ability to deal with things like privacy, deal with issues with law enforcement. That's a core value of the industry.
As part of this, when we get back to safety, are you aware of any requirements or discussions about requirements that require maintaining the integrity of this data and the safety of this data in the event of a crash. You know, one of the things that's critical, like black boxes for airlines, is that you know, all of the LiDAR sensors, the motion sensors, video, all the things that are being generated on these cars or vehicles in real time. Is there any requirement to save that in the event of an accident?
I don't know that there's a requirement, but it's absolutely in our interest too. These vehicles, I talked earlier about an event where we were sideswiped by another actor on the road. From that, we were able to understand that the vehicle behaved appropriately, or at least our vehicle behaved appropriately, exactly when the event occurred, all the situation around it. And it allows us to both make our system better and better understand the events that happened.
Thank you all for your time. I know that many of you will be traveling by aircraft, and I would just point out that those aircrafts are highly automated and that the pilots do very little, even all the way to approach. So I think if you trust your air travel with automation, I think we can probably trust our road travel with automation in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Williams. The chair now recognizes Mr. Moulton from the great state of Massachusetts for 5 minutes.
Just continuing my colleague's line of questioning, how many Americans have died in major passenger airliner crashes in the last 5 years?
Congressman, I'm not aware of that.
The answer is 0. How many people have died in Tesla crashes attributed to automation in the last 5 years?
Congressman, I'm not familiar with that, but I can tell you that...
I can tell you it's a lot more than 0.
I'm sorry?
I can tell you it's a lot more than 0.
And that is a different
Mr.
technology
Urmson
than
is nodding
we're
his
talking
head
about.
there, right? So the idea that we're safe traveling on automated planes, and yet therefore we should assume we're safe traveling on highways with automated vehicles, is just plain wrong by the facts. I am concerned about the fact that a lot of people get in their Teslas assuming that they can push a button and they'll have fully autonomous driving. I asked some questions about this at an earlier hearing, and it was explained by the witness that there's a big difference between the actual capabilities of the Tesla, which he said was about level 2, versus the level 4 or 5 automation that unfortunately a lot of Tesla drivers assume they're getting when they push that button. How do we address this major discrepancy where people get in a car, think they can be driven by themselves, and yet actually they're choosing an option that's not only dangerous for themselves, but for other people on the highway?
So I share your concern. I thank you for the question, and I think it's a very astute observation that that a lot of people do not understand the difference between the technologies, and I think there's an opportunity for the Department of Transportation to continue their campaign in education around the difference between driver assistance technologies, which are what we believe is in the Tesla product, and fully automated driving is what we're talking about and developing. At Aurora, we take that safety responsibility very seriously. We've shared transparently our approach to developing a safe system. It's a holistic approach that spans from proficiency, where we...
I'm sure I can tell you're taking this seriously, and I appreciate that very much. Look, I have some obvious concerns about people who are dying on the road because of this technology perhaps being deployed too soon. But another one of my concerns is that we don't win this race, and China wins this race. And we have to balance these two concerns. We want to see American companies develop this technology and set the standards for the world. We want to see them do it in a way that's safe for the American traveling and walking public. What are some of the threats that you're concerned about with Chinese LiDAR technology? I mean, I sit on the Armed Services Committee, I sit on the China Select Committee. I don't like the idea of very intricate mapping data of our roads, video of our American people being transmitted back to Beijing on an hourly basis because we have Chinese cars that have full data links up to the PRC operating in America. And I'm delighted to hear from anyone on this subject.
So I can talk a little bit about what we do at Aurora. So we have a committed cybersecurity team. It's about 50 people that focus on that. We've done assessments of our technology and don't see data leaking from it. Furthermore, we've invested heavily. We acquired a company in Bozeman, Montana, about 4.5 years ago at this point, where we're developing next-generation LiDAR technology to enable our vehicles. It's actually a critical technology. We heard earlier questions about being able to, the challenges that come with operating a large vehicle at speed or a heavy vehicle at speed. That means you have to see further down the road. That's why truck cabs are so high. So this LiDAR, we call it First Light, enables us to see far enough to actually drive safely in these conditions.
Let me ask another question about your vehicles. Am I correct that a typical tractor trailer weighs about 16 or 17 tons? Is that about right?
Well, the federal limit's 80,000 pounds.
Right, so that's when it's loaded, right?
Oh, you're talking about empty?
But just the vehicle itself?
Oh, the tractor.
Yeah.
That's correct. Yeah.
Okay. How much do AVs with electric vehicle technology, are they going to weigh more or less?
About 2 batteries to power a fully loaded tractor trailer, 16,000 pounds each, so about 32,000 pounds, which, by the way, counts against the payload.
Counts against the payload, right. So for a full truck, you're going to have trucks that are about the same weight, but they're going to be able to carry less goods.
That's correct. So you're going to need more trucks, more drivers, another role for innovation.
Do you think that they should pay higher road fees because of the additional damage they're doing to our highways?
Not if you're not exceeding the 80,000 pounds, no.
But if they're traveling empty and they weigh twice as much or 3 times as much?
No different. They still pay the road fees. We're paying half the taxes to the Federal Highway Trust Fund already.
Okay, it doesn't surprise me that you don't think they should pay higher fees, but they are doing much more damage.
No, we're happy to pay higher fees. We lobbied for increase in the gas tax. So that's our shop floor. That's
Okay.
where we do our business. So we get a great return of having good roads and bridges. So less damage to the vehicles, we're all in on that. So we're willing to pay more in return.
Gentleman's time has expired. The chair now
Thank you, Mr.
recognizes absolutely. The chair now recognizes Mr. Van Drew from New Jersey.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you all for being here. So I just a couple thoughts, and I know everybody likes to philosophize while we're up here, but you can't help it. It's part of the job. But you know, Mr. Spear, when you say that small truckers, you can look those folks in the eye and say that their job is always going to be there. And I say this, and I don't know you, so I don't say this in any dispersion at all to you. In all my years of being in Congress and being in the state Senate, I had a lot of people look me right in the eye and say something wasn't going to happen, and it sure did. As the years go by, it's going to be cheaper for you to do it automated eventually, and it's going to be, maybe easier. I don't know, because we're going to have to see what the outcome is. But I feel we're losing small businesses in this country at every level. Mr. Burleson talked about farms. And yeah, I know that now people can do other jobs, but a lot of people liked having a small family farm. They can't do it. Lots of folks have their small trucking companies. I have 93 towns. One of them, Vineland, has a number of small trucking companies and family-owned through multiple generations. That, in reality, if you look into the future, if we're not careful, is the way this is going to go. Do you ever envision AI taking care of all the services that these trucks will need, as far as tune-ups and still the basic things that have to be done to vehicles?
So I can talk.
Yeah, whoever wants to answer.
If that's okay, thank you for the question. And this is why we are actually investing in training and accreditation programs. So we work with the Pittsburgh Technical College, where we're working with them to develop training for vehicle service technicians for this industry. We're working with Gallatin College in Bozeman, Montana, to develop sensor technician training and development. So we are trying to help develop the upskilling for the workforce of the future.
Okay. In the future, do you ever anticipate that, after you're gone and I'm gone, I'll be going first, but do you ever anticipate that there will be a time when everything will be automated, including the service work that needs to be done and everything else? If we can drive huge trucks on the road automated, I don't know why we couldn't do the service automated. Literally, do you picture a time, generations in the future, where you'll be a totally automated company and there'll only be corporate leadership that will be human?
I don't think my imagination is that big, but what I would reflect on is that if I think back to time well before me, the 15th century, 16th century, I think folks looking forward to the jobs of today wouldn't even be able to fathom them. And I would expect that there's going to be incredible new opportunities that are afforded by innovation and by America leading the way with it.
One point I would make too, we spoke about airplanes, and they are automated to a great degree. There's always 2 pilots still in the plane, And that's what concerned me. If we were automating, but there would still be somebody, a human being that knew how to drive a truck in the truck, that's one thing. But the fact that we're just going to have these trucks without any human assistance other than at the terminals still concerns me. Deadly crash, and I know it's different, and I know the system is different, but still, Tesla, again, folks looked you in the eye and said, man, there's going to be no problems at all. And their vehicles have failed. There was one instance where they failed to see a tractor trailer in the sun, and an Uber car in Tempe, Arizona, struck a pedestrian after failing to identify her, and that's only a few of the issues. And I associate myself with some of the comments you made, Ms. Chase. These examples highlight the safety risks that we still do have, and we have to go carefully, and we still have to incorporate. And I know the words are easy in Congress, but the reality, the truck drivers who've made their living through generations in small business, I mean, small business is going to become non-existent if we keep going this way in America. American truckers deserve clarification, and that's what we're trying to do here. And it's funny, and other people have mentioned it, we're in the middle of National Truck Appreciation Week, but yet we're having this conversation of how, and I know you wouldn't say that, and I know you don't think that, but we can do away with truck drivers in reality. Let me say this. I have a few questions, and I guess I know the one answer real quick, just because I know we're going to run out of time. Do you believe autonomous is safer than the truck driving, human being driving the truck? Yes or no? Yes, Mr. Romer.
Congressman, I'll just answer very briefly, seeing that we're at time here. I think that the exciting thing is what we see now from the data that's coming out is our members are reaching certain thresholds, is that we are improving against the status quo. That is important. It's important to keeping roads safe for the United States. It's something we're very proud of.
One question I'm going to not ask you, because I know our time is up, but I'll send in writing, is this going to save the companies a great deal of money ultimately? So I thank you for being here. I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Van Drew. The chair now recognizes my friend, Mr. Carball, from the great state of California.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. First of all, from the onset, I want to say how exciting this technology is and the innovation and the promise that it has for society and transforming many aspects of what we do, especially in reducing costs. But then we have the safety issue. And quite frankly, that's what leads me to have concerns over how advanced driving assistance programs are being marketed to consumers. Recently, a constituent of mine took me on a drive with one of these full self-driving Teslas, and it was alarming to see failure after failure after failure. And so it raises lots of concerns about safety and confidence in the technology and the ripeness of it. So, Mr. Urmson, can you speak to why regulating level 2 and level 3 to 5 of driving automation together creates consumer confusion about the capability of technology?
No, thank you for the question, and I think, again, that's a very astute observation, that these are just fundamentally different technologies. Driver assistance technologies are developed with the intent of an operator being there, a driver being there, paying attention, and getting assistance from it. And this is, to the best of my understanding, what the Tesla system is. In contrast, we're developing a system that is able to take full responsibility for the driving task, where we're not dependent on a lack of confusion between the driver and the vehicle to ensure safety, and where we are developing with a much more, I believe, robust approach to safety.
It sounds like you're creating the gold standard. How does Aurora approach interaction with local communities you are testing in, especially local governments and first responders?
This is one of the areas where I'm particularly proud of the way the company's engaged. We see that the stakeholder set that's involved in this is broad, and from day one, we've engaged at the federal level, the state level, the local level. We work with emergency and first responders in the communities we operate. We have a gentleman on staff who had, I think, 30 years of experience, Gary, in law enforcement. One of the shining examples of the collaboration we've put in place is our trucks operate through an inland border patrol station in Texas. We're the first company that can do that autonomously. And together, that was us and the CBP coming together to figure out a process to integrate this technology safely into their existing processes.
Thank you. Mr. Farah, the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, NHTSA, has issued a standing general order on AV crash reporting, requiring manufacturers of fully and partially automated vehicles to report crash data. Do you support the continuation of this standing order? And would you support its expansion to include additional information such as on disengagements or transfer of control to a human driver to help the public, the consumers, better understand the reliability and safety of automated vehicles?
Congressman, thank you very much for the question. I think that I've come back a few different times during this testimony to talk about the importance of the standing general order, the transparency of the data. This is something that we're very proud of, the safety record that is presented. There are certainly improvements that can be made to the SGO in terms of what gets reported, how it's presented to the public, so there isn't a lot of confusion out there. And so there may be refinements, but certainly this is something that we understand the importance of it and expect it to continue.
So you support that?
We support having the data presented. We think there might be opportunities to improve how it is done.
Thank you very much. Mr. Chair, I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Carvajal. The chair now recognizes Mr. Burchett from the great state of Tennessee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Farah, how do you say that? Farah?
It's Farah, sir.
Farah, all right. A recent report found that 84% of automakers surveyed share or sell personal data. Should Americans worry that automation of commercial vehicles will further compromise our privacy?
Congressman, certainly appreciate the question. I don't think that they should be. I think that the companies within our organization are incredibly motivated to safeguard that data. This is data that is important for the performance of the vehicle. That's going to make the roadways safer for your constituents. And so I think there's a very strong alignment between what the industry is doing to improve roadway safety, but also with those that care very deeply about privacy as you do.
Well, I appreciate that answer, but still, they're sharing that personal data, and some of that data has very little, I feel like, to do with automobile or safety on the road. And I'm wondering, will we be able to, and we know what they're sharing, and some of that stuff I've seen is just not, to me, it just doesn't share any of those attributes that you said. So I hope we're going to hold you to that. I hope you are aware of that. Well, let me ask you, switch gears a little bit. Can the federal government improve regulations to support private sector innovation and investment?
Congressman, they absolutely can. I think one thing that we've noted today is that I think that there is a very strong need for FMCSA to move forward on an autonomous trucking specific rulemaking. This is something there should be bipartisan support for that. What we have right now is a situation where our industry, private sector capital, wants to be put to work. It wants to develop safer roads, ease the supply chain. There are certain issues that we would like to see tackled by the federal government, and that is a way that we can ultimately help the domestic industry to continue to invest that capital and create jobs.
Okay. Mr. Urmson, sensor data, it's collected, shared, and used. How is that? How are y'all doing that?
Thank you for the question. So we gather data from our vehicles to support the development and improving the safety of the system. That data stays within our company. We have in place, we're compliant with the required privacy policies around this, privacy rules. And we have procedures in place to respond to law enforcement requests as well.
I don't trust the federal government getting a lot of this information. How can I trust you all?
I think it's in our interest to protect this data, right? We're investing significant amount of money to develop the technology, and intellectual property is core to our success.
Okay, have any of these privacy concerns been brought to your attention related to sensor data?
I'm certainly aware of the general set of concerns around it, and certainly share them.
What steps are y'all taking to protect operational systems, software, and data cybersecurity?
Yeah, thank you for that question. We have a dedicated staff of cybersecurity experts. It's about 50 people that are working to both secure our corporate infrastructure and also secure the product. We obviously, as I said previously, our intellectual property is critical to our success, and so it's very much in our interest to protect it.
Mr. Spear, what's the ATA doing to ensure automated commercial motor vehicles are not vulnerable to cyber attacks?
We have a Technology Maintenance Council, a Law Enforcement Advisory Board. We work closely with the Commercial Vehicle Safety Alliance to develop a program called SciWatch, and it's built on protocols and guidance from DHS, DOJ, DOT, and those protocols are then shared with our membership, large, medium, and small. So we're setting those standards, we're sharing it. Creating those best practices are absolutely imperative. So as we adopt more technology that could be subject to a cyber attack, we want those protocols put in place. We do monthly calls with the administrator TSA, specific on cyber, and they are actually offering to train our staff so we have a better granular understanding for our mode, and those best practices then are in turn shared with our membership. So that collaboration is very robust, and I'm very encouraged by that. We need to do more, but I do believe that we're doing the right things on this front.
Mr. Vera, how can we improve regulations that support the private sector innovation and investment?
Congressman, I think that the most important thing here is that as we reach this new age where autonomous vehicles are starting to be deployed on our roads, there are certain clarifications that we need from the federal government, because a lot of the discussion that's taken place beforehand didn't necessarily include our industry. And so this is going to be a key piece, and that will ultimately help to deploy more private sector capital and create more private sector jobs.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Burchett. The chair now recognizes Mr. Allard from the great state of Texas for 5 minutes.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thanks to our witnesses for being here. I'm glad that so many of the newly established AV companies have chosen Texas for their headquarters or for their pilot programs. In addition to being a member of Congress, I'm a father of a 4- and a 2-year-old, and so, Ms. Chase, I appreciated your testimony today, and to me, this conversation has to be centered around safety, because if you drive around Dallas or any of our big cities in Texas, you're gonna get on the highway, and I've got 2 car seats in the back seat of my car, and the last thing I want is a big truck that is, for whatever reason, whether it's human error or through technological error, gonna create a really dangerous situation. And so I've appreciated, I think, the kind of robust discussion about safety that we've had today. And I think that it's clear to me that y'all are taking it very seriously. I think I'm on the aviation subcommittee as well, and we have American Airlines and Southwest Airlines in my area, and I can tell you, I think your standard will not be much different from theirs in terms of there's going to be a very low acceptance of any kind of automated risks here. Just like in the aviation space, where one accident has much more ripple effects throughout the entire industry. And I'm also the co-chair of the Supply Chain Caucus, which we refounded. And I'm glad to hear that Aurora is already testing freight loads along the I-45 route between Dallas and Houston. This is a vital corridor for our state, and the efficiency is something that I think is really important when we talk about this. And so, Mr. Urmson, I was wondering if you could just speak about any lessons that Aurora has learned so far from this route.
No, it's certainly increased my appreciation for the complexity of logistics. So I, unfortunately, have never driven a truck. My parents didn't drive trucks, but that leads me into the place of the humility of making sure we surround ourselves at the company with folks who have domain expertise from various different carriers. And it was important to me that as we hired drivers into the company, that they were true employees, that they had equity, they had the same kind of benefits that the rest of us had at the company, because they're so valuable to what we do. And I think the insight we get from those drivers, I've taken the 11-hour journey in the truck from Fort Worth to El Paso. I've taken many times the 3-hour trip from Dallas and Houston, and just the
3 hours on a good day. Yeah.
I'm sorry, sir?
Yeah, 3 hours on a good day.
Yeah.
It can be longer. Yeah.
It could be depending on traffic, but it was really incredible to see how far ahead these drivers look. It led to that kind of insight of understanding how far you need to look ahead led to the investment we've made in LiDAR in Montana, in this case, to develop that in America and to push the capabilities there. So it's really impressive to see.
Yeah, that's great. Well, thank you. Well, with so many AV trucking companies in the Dallas area, I'm excited about the potential, as I said, for this technology to improve our supply chains, but also want to make sure that we're considering and discussing the potential impact of the technology on jobs. And I know that Dallas College, which has campuses in my district, has been working with the AV industry, and I think with Aurora in particular, to envision a new workforce development programs geared towards sort of the next generation of transportation jobs. So, Mr. Urmson, Mr. Fair, if you could speak to the kinds of AV trucking jobs you think this will create, and how the education system can help prepare us for the workforce of the future in this area.
Thank you for the question. Yeah, we're very excited to work with Dallas College. We already work with Gallatin College in Montana, and we work with the Pittsburgh Technical College in Pennsylvania on different elements of this job and developing the workforce. It actually is fascinating. We've talked a lot about displacement, and the story that comes to mind for me is what happened with automation in the banking industry. So everyone was worried that as automated tellers took place, there would be no job for tellers anymore, and in fact, the opposite has occurred. Because reducing the friction of delivering the service, because it reduced the friction of delivering the service, it allowed people to be in better value-add jobs, and it created more of them. So in this space, we see more opportunities for service technicians. There's going to be more things on these trucks to fix and to maintain. We see remote support teams. Think of them as taxi dispatchers for trucks that are helping the truck understand how to respond to the world. So lots of opportunity.
Sure. And that's okay. I'll yield back, and thank you, Mr. Chairman.
You're welcome, sir. The chair now recognizes my friend from the great state of Georgia, Mr. Mike Collins.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and it's good to see you, Mr. Spear. It's good to see all of you. Appreciate you. I've been kind of listening in and out. We kind of bounce around like basketballs around here from hearing to hearing. But just wanted to focus on one main thing real quick. You know, I started driving a truck when I was around 14, 15 years old, and learned on the two-stick transmission. There was actually two sticks in there. Since that time, we've had ABS braking, disc brakes, collision mitigation, we've had rollover stability, we've had lane departure, we've had adaptive cruise. The list goes on, and we've even got automatic transmissions now. We've gone from two sticks down to a button that you push from R, N, or D. The technology is always going to change. It's always changing. And you shouldn't be afraid of change. You shouldn't be afraid of any new technology. In most of the cases, it makes you more productive. And we need more productivity in the trucking industry. We've talked about weight issues here and how we can make more productive. So, Mr. Spear, I guess my main question is, from a federal government standpoint, and I've already heard you answer the question once today, what can we do, or what can the federal government do to address the autonomous trucking vehicle as it comes out?
Well, don't panic. Don't panic. This is a wonderful venue to really understand where it sits and where it's headed, not only in terms of safety, quality of life for our workforce, what the gaps are and where innovation can fill them, but also our ability as a country to compete globally. We don't want to concede this to China or anybody else around the world. But let's not be afraid of innovation. It is a good thing. As you just said, it's empowerment of our drivers to be able to operate that equipment with better awareness, better responsiveness. These are all good additives that are going to continue as we integrate this equipment in. They're going to make those skills more marketable, more portable. These are all good things. I'm not concerned about displacement. You've heard that answer. I didn't get a chance to answer, but the written testimony points to a 2021 DOT study that says that earnings are going to increase across for all long-haul truckers, increase overall employment, increase the U.S. GDP, and they did not find that there would be industry layoffs. That's a 2021 DOT study. We put that in our written testimony because we're trying to get our arms around how we take innovation and channel it in the most productive, controlled sense. And I think the collaboration with you in developing that safety performance standard, that framework federally, so we don't have a patchwork of laws, that would go a long way to helping us, advance the technology properly.
And I think I heard you say earlier that something from the federal government standpoint that y'all could work with together to come up with a framework of guardrails as this technology is developed. And I want to really emphasize that. Y'all, this industry is not an industry where we sit inside four walls. We don't make our living there. We make our living out on the road with other families, your family, my family. We want to be safe. I don't know of a trucking company out there that doesn't want to be safe. And when they're not safe, they're taken off the road. But what we have in this industry, in the transportation industry, is we have a Department of Transportation on the federal level that is being run by someone that is pushing a woke, socialistic, left-wing agenda, and he has no idea what he's doing. That's going to get somebody hurt more than autonomous vehicles. We'll never get rid of drivers. There's always going to be a place for a driver at some point, but there may be lanes that you can put autonomous vehicles in. But until we get somebody in the Department of Transportation that understands that and quits pushing an agenda or an experiment, then you're not going to get very far. And what you do get is going to be dangerous. We've already seen that in the railroad industry. We've already seen that in the airline industry when NOTAM shut the industry down. So that's my solution. The ATA has been very instrumental in even working with the federal government, sometimes where I didn't agree. But they have always been giving and encouraging and wanting to work with to make sure that this is the best dadgum industry in the world to work in, and it is. With that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Collins. I appreciate that tremendously. The chair now recognizes myself for 5 minutes. This is a very contentious issue, and I understand that. Two of my uncles were over-the-road truckers. One of them didn't notice the 11-foot sign on a bridge, so he was no longer a over-the-road trucker. So maybe our family wasn't the best over-the-road truckers, but dang it, we were there. And I appreciate this industry. These are good jobs. They provide for families across the country, and we need to make sure that we are growing our pool of drivers. So both folks are saying some things here. I just kind of want to level the bubbles and give some perspective. So December is the 120th anniversary of the Wright Flyer taken off 120 years ago, right? So if you took the Wright Flyer and stuck it on a runway next to an F-35, you would see a difference. So we do have to continue growing these technologies, but can everybody here on that board just say yes or no? Can you agree right now and state publicly that our AV technology for these trucks, particularly the over-the-road trucks, that the technologies are not there yet? Like, we cannot completely rely on these now to move our goods around the country. Can you agree to that? Is it yes or no?
Today, we're not ready to rely on it completely, no.
Good. Mr. Ferro?
Congressman, industry-wide, the technology is here. It is already making the roads safer. We are seeing increased applications in things like
Is
AV
that a
trucking.
yes? I'm serious, man. Is that a yes?
Technology is here and is being applied in different ways across the country.
Okay, so I'm going to give you a maybe. Mr. Spear?
Not yet, but it will be.
Very well. Ma'am?
Yes.
Mr. Chase? Okay. All right, check me out. Mr. Spear, I'm going to hit you again on this because I want to echo Mr. Van Drew's concerns. 72.5% of our domestic goods are being transported by trucks. In the future, looking down the road, what percentage of these trucks do you think would be autonomous?
Oh, wow. That's a really good question.
Yeah.
I don't think we have good data yet for it in terms of what, it would really depend on our ability to have a federal framework.
I understand.
You're going to see regional operations, you're going to see lanes being run between Texas and California where that's optimal, but in terms of expanding it to all 50 states, that's going to take time. So it's a tough one to gauge right now. I'd love to have a federal framework so that we could grow this nationally and deal with those problems.
I would say, Mr. Spear, with that in mind, I would caution you to say that you'd look anybody in the eye and say they're not going to lose their job, because you cannot answer what percentage of these vehicles are going to be autonomous. You just can't. You just said it. So let's kind of, that's your reputation you're talking about, not mine. And so let me ask you this other question. how long can the United States of America, how long can we sustain ourselves if a significant portion of our trucking stopped in a millisecond?
Not more than a week.
Not more than a week. Okay, so these are things that we cannot trifle with, Mr. Spear. JBS got hacked. It's 1/4 of our ability to cut meat in the United States. You remember that? People were wondering where their pork chop was. It was rotting the carcass in a field in Iowa because that was a cyber issue. And Ms. Chase, I completely appreciate what you're saying. And Mr. Spear, you're getting briefed by guys on the cyber stuff. You know what? The DOD gets hacked all the time. The CIA got hacked. The FBI gets hacked. So I don't trust that. I do not. And the difference between some service members' names, which I was one of them, and personal information after the DOD got hacked by China, the difference between me having to get LifeLock or whatever the heck that is, and our entire nation shutting down in a week are significant. So until we are able to secure these systems and these vehicles, I don't have confidence enough to get these on the road across the board. And I want everyone to remember, Wright Flyer F-35. So I understand we're in a continuum. So please keep that in mind. On the hazmat issue, you know what? You're going to have 32,000 pounds worth of lithium batteries on these? Is that right? You're going to have two 16,000-pound?
Up to, yes.
Okay, lithium is a hazardous material. So you're talking 32,000 pounds of hazardous material in every one of these electric tractors. So we're already talking about driving hazardous materials, not in the cargo, but under the tractor. Okay, so let's not forget that either. And lithium is a class Delta fire. When it catches on fire, it'll burn through other metals. So that, we got to work on that stuff. And here's the other thing. You know what? My time has expired, and I'm going to hold myself to the same standard as everybody else. So has everybody else in the committee been recognized? Oh, sorry, Mr. Miller. The chair now yields back, and I recognize my stealthy friend from the state of New York, Mr. Molinaro, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That is not a description that's ever been used in my for me, but I appreciate it. I want to thank you all for being here, and actually I want to continue a little bit from my colleagues' comments. Of course, we are this week we do acknowledge truck drivers, and I appreciate all of you in one capacity or another express both the need to acknowledge the work of America's truck drivers, but as each of you has alluded to, either directly or indirectly, the need to continue to support truck drivers in this country. Having served at the local level during the pandemic and economic shutdown, two very different things, but they occurred at the same time, I can tell you that I saw firsthand the value and the great work of America's truck drivers, but also the weakness in our supply chain. So I will tell you that obviously automated commercial vehicles is exciting. It's a technology that we already know is underway and being used, as my colleague referenced. What I want to, however, put an exclamation mark next to is that it is critically imperative that as the technology grows and innovation continues, that we do that in partnership with truck drivers, law enforcement, and emergency responders. It is imperative that we work together with truck drivers, law enforcement, and emergency responders. And to that end, I would offer, as and if the federal government starts to create greater guidance, there is a seismic change in emergency response and the need to ensure that emergency responders are able to respond to incidents that this kind of technology certainly brings to the fore. Mr. Farrer, I know that my colleague was asking for a yes or no answer, and it was interesting to me because earlier in your testimony, you basically said yes, or you basically said no, the technology isn't quite there yet, and that we need to rely in partnership on truck drivers, and at some point, you said autonomous trucking needs truck drivers. I understand what that means, transition, et cetera, but I feel like you said that. And while the technology is exciting, we certainly do have a concern for loss of jobs. And so I wonder what projection has been done to identify both the pace of expansion of the technology and how that results in and what that would result in job loss.
Thank you, Congressman. I appreciate the opportunity to clarify. What I was trying to get at earlier is that when you look at autonomous driving systems generally, whether passenger cars, shuttles, zero occupancy delivery vehicles, and trucks, we are seeing these applications play out. We have situations where there are passenger cars going in various cities. There are shuttles that are operating in places like senior centers and in university campuses and whatnot. So those are all happening today, and we see that technology is already improving safety, it is improving mobility and accessibility for the residents in that area. With respect to autonomous trucking, I think as we're seeing today, this technology continues to play out. You see some very exciting partnerships and pilots that are being announced, but there are companies that are needing to do additional development to get to that space. And so it's a little more
That I
nuanced.
understand. So I serve on the aviation subcommittee, and we talk a lot about advanced air mobility, and that technology is going to fill a void. This technology is going to create the loss of something, and that is trucks being driven by human beings. What's the timeline? In other words, what do we think the build-out is, and how do we, what will that do to the loss of jobs? Not the broad.
Absolutely. We see this technology as augmenting truck drivers. We need them in partnership. The reality is that the volume of freight...
But you'll need less of them.
Not necessarily. This is going to fill different parts of the market. As we know, we have a massive truck driver shortage. We have more volume of freight that is going to be coming down the lane. And so we need to figure out a way to move this to support manufacturers, farmers, ranchers. Those are things that are absolutely essential. We want to be a part of that solution and work in partnership with truck drivers to do that.
So can you, and of course, I assume everyone on the panel, perhaps, you'll commit to working with Congress in partnership with truck drivers and emergency response and law enforcement as we develop those guidelines, is that a commitment that the organization is making?
Absolutely. We're already doing that. We look forward to doing that in the future.
Mr. Spear wanted to say yes, too.
Absolutely. It's my job.
I only have a few seconds, but I wanted to ask you, Mr. Spear, just speak to the exciting consequence of this technology and how folks all across the country might benefit.
Well, I think innovation should be embraced. I just want to be clear on what I was saying earlier is that I don't view, I didn't say people were going to be guaranteed their job. I said I don't view it as being threatened by innovation. There is a gap. There is a gap of meeting demand and our ability to add talent. And as long as that gap exists, and it's going to grow, there's a room for automation and technology to play. So not threatened by it. We should embrace it. And we look forward to working with this committee to really work on this issue and put some definition around it long term.
Mr. Chairman, if I just might say, I certainly support the technology. It is critically important that we do that in partnership with the people who are sitting at home thinking that innovation is going to take their job. And that can't happen without them at the table.
The gentleman yields back. Are there any further questions from members of the subcommittee who have not been recognized? All right. Seeing none, that concludes our hearing for today, and I'd like to thank each one of you witnesses for coming here. I know it's tough. I get it. I ask unanimous consent that the record of today's hearing remain open until such time as our witnesses have provided answers to any questions that may be submitted to them in writing. I know you're going to get a few. Without objection, so ordered. I also ask unanimous consent that the record remain open for 15 days for any additional comments and information submitted by members or witnesses to be included in the record of today's hearing. Without objection, so ordered. Subcommittee stands adjourned.